There are moments in life when a single choice changes everything. And for Ada McCrae, that moment came on an ordinary September morning when she heard a child crying in the woods. She'd been gathering herbs near the ridge when she found them. 3 boys, alone and terrified, miles from any town or road. The eldest was trying his best to be brave. The middle one watched her with suspicious eyes. The youngest clutched a leather satchel like his life depended on it. They wouldn't tell her who they were or where they'd come from. But within days, Ada would discover these weren't ordinary lost children. They were heirs to a fortune, and someone wanted them to stay lost forever. What were 3 wealthy boys doing in her mountains, and how far would powerful men go to silence them? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Ada McCrae had learned to read the mountain the way some people read books. Every bent branch told a story. Every shift in the wind carried information. Every bird call meant something if you knew how to listen. She'd spent 7 years in these Montana peaks, and in that time, the wilderness had become more familiar to her than any town, any church, any gathering of people ever could be. Her cabin sat tucked into a natural shelf of rock, 3 miles up from the nearest trail that most folks used. It wasn't large, just one main room with a sleeping loft, a stone fireplace she'd built herself, and windows that faced east to catch the morning light. The logs were chinked tight against the wind, the roof was sound, and the door hung true on its hinges. She'd built it with her own hands, one log at a time, learning as she went from a book she'd borrowed from the town library before she left civilization behind. That morning, she'd risen before dawn as she always did. The September air carried the first real bite of autumn, and she knew winter would come early this year. The signs were everywhere if you paid attention. The thickness of the squirrels' coats, the way the aspens had started turning gold 2 weeks earlier than usual, the restless behavior of the elk moving down from the high country. She'd pulled on her wool pants and flannel shirt, both mended in multiple places but still serviceable. Her boots were good leather, resoled twice by her own hand. She took up her walking stick, a length of pine she'd carved with notches, marking every season she'd survived up here. 7 deep cuts, 1 for each winter. This would be her 8th. The herb gathering was routine. She needed yarrow for poultices, some late-season mint if she could find it, and pine nuts from the stands higher up the ridge. Her knowledge of plants had come from her mother, passed down through generations of women who'd understood that the forest provided if you knew where to look and what to ask for. She carried a canvas sack and her knife, moving quietly through the undergrowth. That's when she'd heard it. A child's cry, thin and frightened, cutting through the morning stillness like a knife. Ada had frozen, every sense suddenly alert. Children didn't belong this far into the mountains. The nearest ranch was 15 miles away, and no family with any sense would let their young ones wander these woods alone. She'd stood perfectly still listening, trying to locate the source of the sound. It came again, not a single voice, but maybe 2, carrying on the breeze from somewhere beyond the next rise. She'd moved quickly then, her walking stick silent against the soft earth, following the sound. When she crested the ridge and looked down into the hollow below, her breath caught in her throat. 3 boys huddled beneath a stand of pine, their backs against a fallen log. The eldest stood in front of the other 2, his posture protective, despite the way his whole body trembled. He couldn't have been more than 12 years old. The middle boy crouched beside him, wiry and tense, his eyes scanning the forest like a cornered animal. The youngest sat behind them both, his face streaked with tears and dirt, clutching a leather satchel to his chest. Their clothes told a story Ada understood immediately. These weren't ranch children or the sons of miners. Their shirts, though torn and stained, had been fine quality once. The youngest wore shoes that had been expensive before they'd been ruined by rough travel. Even from a distance, she could see the cuts and scratches on their faces and hands, the exhaustion in the way they held themselves. She'd approached slowly, making sure they could see her coming. The last thing frightened children needed was to be startled. "Easy now," she'd called out softly when she was still 20 feet away. I'm not going to hurt you. The eldest boy had stepped forward, trying to make himself bigger, trying to put himself between her and his brothers. His voice cracked when he spoke. Stay back. We don't need help, but his eyes told a different story. They were full of fear and desperation and a hope he was trying very hard to hide. Ada had stopped, held up her hands to show they were empty. My name is Ada McCrae. I live up the mountain a ways. You boys look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to rest. We're fine, the eldest insisted, but his voice wavered. The youngest boy had started crying again, pressing his face against his brother's back. The middle one just watched her with those sharp, suspicious eyes, sizing her up, looking for threats. I can see you're scared, Ada said gently, and I can see you've been through something terrible. But you're miles from anywhere and night's coming on. Whatever you're running from, you'll handle it better with food in your bellies and rest in your bones. She'd waited, letting them decide. That was important, giving them the choice, letting them feel some control over what happened next. Finally, the eldest boy's shoulders had sagged. Just for one night. Just for one night, Ada agreed, though she already suspected it would be longer than that. The walk back to her cabin had been slow. The boys were exhausted, stumbling over roots and rocks, their strength nearly spent. Ada had kept the pace gentle, stopping twice to let them rest. She didn't ask questions. Questions could wait until they felt safe. By the time they reached her cabin, the sun had climbed higher, warming the mountain air. She'd pushed open the door and gestured them inside. They'd entered hesitantly, the eldest still positioned protectively, the middle one's eyes taking in every detail of the room. Calculating escape routes. Sit, Ada said, pointing to the chairs around her small table. I'll get some food on. She'd built up the fire and set water to boil, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd cooked for herself alone for 7 years. She had venison from a deer she'd taken 2 weeks prior, smoked and preserved. She had potatoes from the small garden she kept behind the cabin. She had bread she'd baked just yesterday. As she worked, she watched the boys from the corner of her eye. They sat stiffly, clearly uncomfortable, but the smell of cooking food was breaking down their resistance. The youngest kept his satchel in his lap, both arms wrapped around it. The middle boy's eyes never stopped moving, watching everything. The eldest kept glancing at his brothers, checking on them, the weight of responsibility clear in every gesture. When the food was ready, Ada set it before them without ceremony. Eat, she said simply. They'd fallen on the meal like starving animals, and Ada realized they probably were starving. How long had they been out here? Days, weeks? She gave them time, let them fill their bellies before she tried any conversation. Finally, when the food was gone and they sat back in their chairs looking more human, Ada spoke again. I need to know your names, at least. What do I call you? The eldest boy looked at his brothers, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Ada. I'm Henry, this is Sam. He gestured to the middle boy. And that's Owen. The youngest looked up at the sound of his name, his eyes red from crying but calmer now. Henry, Sam, and Owen, Ada repeated, nodding. Good names. Strong names. What are you going to do with us? Sam asked suddenly, his voice sharp with suspicion. Ada had settled into her own chair, studying them thoughtfully. Right now, I'm going to let you rest. You can sleep in the loft. There's blankets up there and it's warm. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. We can't tell you where we came from, Henry said quietly. I'm not asking you to, Ada replied. Not yet. But boys don't end up alone in these mountains by accident. When you're ready to talk, I'll listen. She'd shown them the loft, climbed up the ladder with them to spread out blankets and make sure they'd be comfortable. Owen had clutched his satchel the entire time, never letting it out of his grasp. Ada didn't comment on it. That first night, she'd lain in her own bed by the fireplace, listening to the soft sounds of the boys settling in above her. She heard Owen cry quietly and Henry's gentle shushing. She heard Sam's restless movements as he struggled to trust this new place enough to sleep, and Ada had stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd just brought into her carefully ordered, carefully isolated life. The next morning, she'd woken to find Henry already up. standing by the window watching the sunrise. He turned when he heard her move, his expression guarded. "Your brother's still sleeping?" Ada asked softly. Henry nodded. "They need it. We've been—" He stopped, catching himself. "I know," Ada said. She moved to the fireplace, began building up the fire for breakfast. "You've been running hard." She felt Henry's eyes on her back as she worked. "Why are you helping us?" Ada paused, her hands still for a moment. That was the question, wasn't it? Why had she brought 3 strange boys into her home? Why was she risking her peace, her safety, her careful isolation? "Because someone should," she said finally, turning to face him. "Because I know what it's like to need help and not have anywhere to turn." Henry studied her face, looking for lies, for hidden motives. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Ada continued her daily tasks, checking her snares, gathering wood, tending to the small chores that kept the cabin running. The boys helped where they could, though it was clear they'd never done this kind of work before. Owen was afraid of the axe. Sam had no idea how to gut a rabbit. Henry tried his best, but his hands were soft, unused to rough labor. But they learned. Ada showed them patiently without judgment, and they soaked up the knowledge like parched earth soaking up rain. In the evenings, they sat around the fire, and slowly, in small pieces, the boys began to talk. Not about where they'd come from or why they were running, not yet, but about smaller things. Henry told her about books he'd read. Sam talked about a dog he'd once had. Owen showed her how he could whistle bird calls, and Ada, almost against her will, felt something stirring in her chest. Something she'd thought was dead, something that felt dangerously like hope, like purpose, like the possibility of mattering to someone again. She tried not to think about Rose, tried not to let herself remember what it had been like to have a child depend on her, to have small hands reach for hers, to be needed and loved. But the memories came anyway, unbidden in the quiet moments. Rose had been 2 when the fever took her. 2 years of joy and laughter and love ended in 3 terrible days of helpless watching while her baby burned with heat Ada couldn't break. Her husband, Thomas, had blamed her, said she should have gotten help sooner, should have known something was wrong earlier, should have done something, anything different. The marriage had crumbled after that. Thomas started drinking. Ada started disappearing into herself, unable to bear the weight of his accusations and her own guilt. When he finally left, she'd sold everything they owned, bought supplies, and walked into these mountains with no plan to ever come back down. That had been 7 years ago. 7 years of silence and solitude. 7 years of trying to forget what it felt like to love someone and lose them. Now here were these 3 boys, bringing all those feelings rushing back. She tried to keep her distance emotionally, tried to remind herself this was temporary, that they'd move on soon and she'd be alone again. But on the 5th day, everything changed. She'd woken before dawn to find the boys trying to leave. They were at the door. Owen with his precious satchel, Sam with the small pack of food Ada had noticed was missing, Henry carrying the walking stick he'd borrowed for his injured ankle. Going somewhere? Ada asked from her bed, her voice calm. All 3 boys had frozen. Henry turned slowly, guilt written all over his young face. "We can't stay any longer. It's not safe for you." Ada sat up, pulled on her boots. "Why don't you let me decide what's safe for me?" "You don't understand," Henry said desperately. "They're looking for us. And when they find us, anyone with us will be in danger." Ada stood, moved to the door, placed herself between the boys and the exit. Not blocking them. They could leave if they really wanted to. But making them work for it. Making them confront what they were doing. "Who's looking for you, Henry?" He shook his head. "We can't tell you. Can't or won't." Ada pressed gently. Owen started crying again. Sam put a hand on his little brother's shoulder, his jaw set in a stubborn line. Ada made a decision then. She could let them go, watch them walk back into whatever danger they'd fled from, knowing she'd probably never learn what happened to them. Or she could push, risk driving them away, but maybe, just maybe, get the truth and find a way to actually help. "That satchel," she said, pointing to the bag Owen clutched. What's in it that's worth protecting more than your own safety? Owen's arms tightened around it. Henry stepped in front of his youngest brother protectively. Whatever's in there, Ada continued, it's important. Important enough that you've been carrying it through miles of wilderness. Important enough that you won't leave it even for a moment. Important enough that someone might be chasing you for it. She paused. Let that sink in. Then she softened her voice. I can't help you if I don't know what I'm protecting you from. And make no mistake, boys. If you walk out that door now, exhausted and underfed and hunted, you won't last another week in these mountains. The silence stretched out. Ada could see the war happening behind Henry's eyes. The desperate need to protect his brothers against the equally desperate need for help. Finally, Sam spoke. Show her, Henry. Henry looked at his brother, surprised. She's right, Sam said. We need help. And she's... He glanced at Ada, something almost like trust in his eyes. She's been good to us. Henry closed his eyes, took a deep breath and nodded. He turned to Owen. Let Ada see. Owen looked up at Henry, then at Ada, then back at the satchel. Slowly, with shaking hands, he opened it. Inside were papers. Legal documents, Ada saw as she stepped closer. And something else, a newspaper clipping. Folded and refolded until the creases were worn nearly through. Henry pulled out the clipping, handed it to Ada. She unfolded it carefully, moved to the window where the early light was just beginning to filter through. The headline made her breath catch. Thornhill Estate heirs missing, $10 million fortune in dispute, Ada read quickly, her heart pounding. The article detailed the death of Jonathan and Elizabeth Thornhill in a house fire 6 months prior. It mentioned their 3 sons, Henry, Samuel, and Owen, who had disappeared from their guardian's home 3 weeks ago. There was a substantial reward for information leading to their safe return. She looked up at the 3 boys watching her with terrified eyes. You're the Thornhill heirs, she said softly. Henry nodded. Our parents died. They said it was an accident, but his voice broke. We heard things. Uncle Vernon, he was talking to someone about how he needed to handle the situation before we came of age. We realized he wanted you dead. Ada finished, her voice grim. We ran, Sam said. That night, we just grabbed what we could and ran. Ada looked back down at the clipping, at the mention of $10 million. That was a fortune worth killing for. These boys weren't just lost children, they were targets. She thought of the walking stick in her hand, the 7 notches marking 7 years of isolation. Thought of Rose, buried in a small graveyard in the valley below. Thought of all the ways she'd tried to die inside, to stop feeling, to stop caring, and she thought of these 3 boys, alone and hunted, looking at her with desperate hope. All right, she said, folding the clipping carefully and handing it back. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to tell me everything, every detail you remember about your uncle, about who he was talking to, about what happened the night you ran. And then we're going to figure out how to keep you safe. You'll help us. Owen asked, his voice small. Ada looked at him, at his tear-stained face and his 2 big eyes, and felt something break open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked away for 7 years. Yes, she said. I'll help you. Whatever it takes. And as the sun rose over the mountains, 3 lost boys and 1 broken woman began to plan their survival. They sat around Ada's table as morning light filled the cabin. Ada had made coffee, real coffee, a luxury she rationed carefully, and the boys nursed cups of warm milk. Owen's satchel lay open between them, its contents spread across the rough wooden surface. Ada picked up each document carefully, reading with growing concern. There was the last will and testament of Jonathan and Elizabeth Thornhill. There was the deed to Thornhill Manor and the surrounding timberlands. There were stock certificates, bank statements, legal papers she didn't fully understand, but recognized as important. And there, at the bottom of the pile, was something that made her blood run cold, a letter addressed to Henry, in what must have been his father's handwriting. Have you read this? She asked, holding it up. Henry shook his head. I found it in Father's desk the night we left. I just grabbed everything that looked important. May I? He nodded. Ada unfolded the letter, her eyes moving across the careful script. As she read, her expression grew darker. When she finished, she set it down gently and looked at the three boys. "Your father knew," she said quietly. "He knew Vernon was stealing from the company. He'd discovered evidence of embezzlement going back years. He was planning to confront him the week after. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The week after the fire that killed them both. It wasn't an accident," Henry said, his voice hollow. "We knew it couldn't be. Father was so careful about fire. He always checked the lamps twice before bed. And Mother, she never left candles burning." Sam's hands clenched into fists on the table. "Uncle Vernon killed them. For the money." Ada wanted to deny it, to offer some other explanation, but the evidence was there in black and white. Jonathan Thornhill had documented his brother's crimes, and days later the house had burned with both parents inside. "Tell me about the night you left," Ada said. "Everything you remember." Henry took a breath, collecting himself. "We'd been living with Uncle Vernon for almost 6 months. At first it seemed, I don't know, normal enough. He wasn't warm, but he provided for us. Made sure we had food and clothes. Hired a tutor for our lessons. Then things started changing," Sam interjected. "About 2 months ago, he started asking questions about what Father had told us. Whether we knew about any papers, any documents he might have left. We didn't know anything," Henry continued. "We told him that. But he kept asking, kept pressing. And he started looking at us differently, like we were problems to be solved instead of his nephews." Owen had been silent, but now he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I heard him. That night, I couldn't sleep, and I went downstairs for water. His office door was open just a crack, and I heard him talking to someone." "What did he say?" Ada asked gently. Owen's eyes filled with tears. "He said the boys are a complication. Once they reach majority, they'll inherit everything. And questions will be asked about the management of the estate." And the other man, I didn't see him, just heard his voice. He said, "Accidents happen all the time to children." And Uncle Vernon, he just laughed and said, "Exactly." Ada felt rage building in her chest, hot and fierce. These were children, babies really, despite Henry's attempts at grown-up bravery. And their own blood was plotting their deaths. "You did the right thing running," she said firmly. "Did they see you?" "No, you'd heard?" Owen shook his head. "I was quiet. I went back upstairs and told Henry. We packed that night," Henry said. "Just took what we could carry quietly. We left through my bedroom window. There's a trellis we used to climb when we were younger. We ran to the train station, used money I'd saved to buy tickets as far as we could go." "Why here?" Ada asked. "Why Montana?" "Mother grew up near here," Henry said. "Before she married Father. She used to tell us stories about the mountains, about how beautiful they were. We thought maybe we could find her old home, find someone who remembered her." Ada's heart ached. These boys had been searching for safety in the memory of a mother they'd lost. They'd been traveling for 3 weeks, sleeping rough, scrounging for food, always running. "How did you end up this far into the mountains?" Sam answered this time. "We got off the train in Helena. We were trying to figure out where to go next when we saw them, men looking for us. They had a description. We heard them asking the station master if he'd seen 3 boys traveling alone. We ran again," Henry said. "Stole food from a market. I'm not proud of it, but we were starving. We headed into the foothills, thinking we could hide better in the wilderness. We kept going higher and higher, and then we got lost. We'd been wandering for 2 days when you found us." Ada stood, moved to the window, looked out at the mountains that had been her refuge for so long. Now they were a refuge for these boys too, but for how long? Men who would kill children wouldn't stop searching just because the trail was cold. "The reward mentioned in the newspaper," she said. $5,000 for information leading to your safe return. That's enough money to make a lot of people look very hard." "We know," Henry said quietly. "That's why we can't stay. We're putting you in danger just being here." Ada turned back to face them. "You're not going anywhere, not yet. Not until we have a plan that doesn't end with you dead in a ditch somewhere. But no buts," Ada said firmly. "You came to my mountain. That makes you my responsibility. And I protect what's mine." The words surprised her even as she said them. When had these boys become hers? When had she decided to stake everything on their survival? But looking at their faces, Henry's desperate hope, Sam's guarded relief, Owen's trembling gratitude, she knew the decision was already made. Had been made perhaps the moment she'd heard that first cry in the forest. Now, she said, sitting back down at the table, we need to think this through carefully. Your uncle has money and resources. He has men searching for you. But we have advantages too. What advantages? Sam asked skeptically. We have the truth, Ada said, tapping the letter. We have evidence of his crimes. And we have these mountains. I know every trail, every hiding place, every source of water and food for 50 miles in any direction. This is my territory, and up here I make the rules. She pulled out a rough map she'd drawn over the years, marking trails and landmarks. We're here, she said, pointing. The nearest town is 15 miles that way. The main pass down to the valley is here. There are 2 other ways down, but they're treacherous, especially as winter comes on. What about getting help? Henry asked. The law? Surely if we told them what we know. Money buys influence, Ada said bluntly. Your uncle is wealthy, well-connected. If we go to the local law with this story, who do you think they'll believe? 3 runaway children and a mountain hermit, or a respected businessman concerned about his missing nephews. The truth of this settled over them like a cold blanket. So what do we do? Sam asked. Ada studied the map, thinking. First, we assume they'll find this area eventually. The search will spread, and someone will think to check the higher elevations. We need to be ready to move if necessary. I have another place higher up, a cave I use sometimes when I'm hunting in the deep wilderness. It's not comfortable, but it's defensible and hidden. Second, she continued, we need information. I have a contact, a man named Silas, who brings supplies up from town once a month. He's due in about a week. He can tell us what's being said, who's asking questions, how wide the search has spread. And third, Henry asked. Ada met his eyes. Third, we prepare. I'm going to teach you boys how to survive in these mountains. If we have to run, you need to know how to move quietly, how to find food and water, how to read the weather and the forest. You need to become invisible. Over the next hour, they went through the satchel's contents more carefully. Ada made notes, names of Vernon's associates, dates of suspicious transactions, anything that might be useful. The letter from Jonathan was the most damning evidence, but there were other documents that showed irregularities in the estate management. Your father was a careful man, Ada said with respect. He documented everything. He knew something was wrong, and he was building a case. Fat lot of good it did him, Sam said bitterly. It might do you a lot of good, Ada countered. If we can get this evidence to the right people, someone beyond your uncle's influence, we might be able to turn this around. But that's a problem for later. Right now, survival comes first. She stood, began gathering the papers back into the satchel. As she did, her hand brushed against something in the bottom of the bag, something hard and metallic. She pulled it out. It was a pocket watch, gold, beautifully engraved. She opened it and saw an inscription, "To my son Henry, with faith in your courage." "Love, father?" She handed it to Henry without a word. He took it with shaking hands, pressed it to his chest, and for the first time since Ada had found them, he broke down completely. Great gasping sobs that shook his thin shoulders. Sam moved to his side, wrapping an arm around his older brother. Owen climbed into Henry's lap, and the 3 of them held each other and cried. Ada turned away, giving them privacy, but her own eyes were wet. She understood loss. She understood the weight of being left behind by someone you loved. When the storm of grief had passed, Henry wiped his eyes roughly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I should be stronger." "Being strong doesn't mean not feeling," Ada said quietly. "It means feeling everything and choosing to keep going anyway." He nodded, clutching the watch like a lifeline. They spent the rest of the morning in practical preparations. Ada took inventory of her supplies, calculated how long she could feed 4 people instead of 1. It would be tight, especially with winter coming. But she was used to stretching resources. After lunch, a simple stew made from her stores, she took the boys outside for their first lesson. "Pay attention," she said. "Your lives might depend on what you learn today. She showed them how to move through the forest quietly, where to place their feet to avoid snapping twigs. She taught them to read animal tracks: deer, elk, bear, mountain lion. She pointed out edible plants and poisonous ones, making them repeat the names until she was sure they'd remember. Sam took to it naturally, his quick mind absorbing the information and his body adapting to the new way of moving. Henry was more awkward but determined, practicing each skill until he got it right. Owen struggled, his smaller size making everything harder, but he tried his best. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Ada led them to a high point where they could see for miles. The mountains stretched out in every direction, peak after peak, fading into blue distance. "This is what protects us," she said. "The vastness, the emptiness. Most people look at this and see danger. We need to see it as an ally." They were heading back to the cabin when Owen spotted it, a thin line of smoke rising from the valley below. Miles away, but clearly visible in the still evening air, Ada's blood went cold. There should be no campfire in that location. It was too far from any trail, too remote for casual travelers. "Is that them?" Sam asked, his voice tight. "Maybe," Ada said. She kept her tone calm, but inside her mind was racing. Or it could be hunters, trappers, someone lost. But she didn't believe that, and from the looks on the boys' faces, neither did they. They hurried back to the cabin. Ada pulled out her spyglass, a good one, military grade, that she'd bought years ago for watching game, and scanned the valley. The smoke was too far away to see details, but as she watched, she saw movement. "Multiple figures, horses, they're here," she said quietly. "Maybe not looking specifically in this area yet, but they're here, searching. What do we do?" Henry asked, and Ada heard the fear in his voice. She lowered the spyglass, turned to face the three boys. "We do exactly what I said. We prepare, we watch, and if they get too close, we run. But we don't panic, and we don't make mistakes." That night, Ada didn't sleep. She sat by the window with the spyglass, watching the distant campfire burn down to embers. She thought about the choice she'd made, about the danger she'd invited into her carefully isolated life. She thought about Rose, buried in the valley below, and about Thomas, who'd blamed her for everything. She thought about 7 years of solitude, of surviving but not truly living, and she thought about 3 boys asleep in her loft, trusting her to keep them safe. The old Ada would have sent them away, protected herself, chosen isolation over risk, but something had changed. Maybe it was the way Henry tried so hard to be brave. Maybe it was Sam's fierce loyalty to his brothers. Maybe it was Owen's tears and his need for comfort, or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe she was just tired of being alone with her grief, tired of merely surviving, tired of punishing herself for a tragedy that hadn't been her fault. As dawn broke over the mountains, Ada made a promise to herself and to the 3 boys sleeping above her. She would protect them. She would fight for them. And this time, she would not fail. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The next morning, Ada woke the boys before sunrise. There was no gentleness in her voice now, no time for slow awakenings. "Up," she said. "We start training today." Real training. They stumbled down from the loft, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Ada had already laid out supplies on the table: rope, knives, canvas bags, dried food. "If we have to leave quickly," she explained, "you need to be able to grab what matters and go. Each of you will have a pack ready at all times. Food, water skin, a blanket, fire-starting materials. Keep it by your bed. Never let it out of reach." She showed them how to pack efficiently, how to distribute weight properly so they could move fast without tiring. Henry's pack would be the heaviest. He was the strongest. Sam's would contain the tools for hunting and foraging. Owen's would be the lightest, but he'd be responsible for the most precious cargo, the satchel with all their documents. "That satchel never leaves your sight," Ada told him. "Not when you sleep, not when you eat. It stays with you always." Owen nodded solemnly, clutching it tighter. After a quick breakfast of cornmeal mush, Ada led them out into the forest. The morning air was crisp and cold, their breath misting in the early light. "First lesson," she said, moving silently. "You've already learned the basics, but now we practice until it becomes instinct. She demonstrated again, the rolling step, heel to toe, testing the ground before putting weight down. She showed them how to use trees and rocks as cover, how to become part of the landscape rather than moving across it. They practiced for 2 hours, moving in single file through the forest. At first, they were clumsy, snapping twigs and rustling leaves. But Ada was patient, correcting them again and again until they began to improve. Sam was the natural. His slight build and quick reflexes made him naturally stealthy. By mid-morning, he could move through thick undergrowth with barely a sound. Henry worked harder, his larger frame making silence more difficult. But he had determination, and slowly, painstakingly, he learned to control his body, to move with deliberation rather than haste. Owen struggled the most. He was only 7, and his legs were short. He had to take 2 steps for every one of his brothers, and he tired easily. But he refused to give up, even when Ada could see exhaustion in his face. "Good," Ada said finally. "That's enough for now. Next lesson." She took them to a small clearing and had them sit. "Look around," she instructed. "What do you see?" "Trees," Sam said. "Rocks, bushes. Look closer." "What else?" They studied their surroundings more carefully. Henry pointed to scratches on a tree trunk. "Something clawed this." "Bear," Ada confirmed. "See how high the marks are?" "Adult male, probably. He marked this tree 2, maybe 3 days ago. See how the sap is starting to dry?" She showed them animal tracks in soft earth, deer, rabbit, squirrel. She taught them to distinguish between fresh tracks and old ones, between an animal moving casually and one running from danger. "The forest talks," she said. "It tells you everything you need to know if you learn its language. Birds go quiet when predators are near. Deer tracks clustered together mean they're nervous, watching something. Fresh broken branches mean something large passed through recently. They spent hours learning to read the signs." Ada was relentless, quizzing them constantly, making them identify plants and tracks until she was satisfied they were starting to understand. It was mid-afternoon when they returned to the cabin for a brief rest and food. The boys were exhausted, but Ada could see something else in their faces, a growing confidence, a sense that they were learning skills that might actually keep them alive. As they ate, Henry pulled out his father's pocket watch. He'd been carrying it in his shirt pocket since Ada had given it to him. He opened it now, studying the inscription, "To my son Henry, with faith in your courage," he read aloud. "I keep wondering what he'd think of me now. Running away, hiding. He'd think you were smart," Ada said firmly. "He'd think you were protecting your brothers, which is exactly what a man does." "I don't feel like a man," Henry said quietly. "I feel like a scared kid pretending to know what to do." Ada set down her cup, looked at him seriously. "That's what being a man is, Henry. It's being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. Your father knew that. He was scared too. Scared enough to document everything Vernon was doing, scared enough to write you that letter. But he did it because it was right, and they killed him for it," Sam said bitterly. "Yes," Ada didn't sugarcoat it. "They did. But that doesn't mean he was wrong. It means Vernon is dangerous and ruthless, which we already knew. The question is, what are you boys going to do about it?" "We're just children," Henry said. "And what can we do?" "You can survive," Ada answered. "You can grow stronger. You can wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, you can fight back with the truth. Your father left you evidence. That was his gift to you. He gave you the weapons you need to bring Vernon to justice. If we live long enough to use them," Sam muttered. "That's why we're training," Ada said. "That's why you're learning. Because survival isn't luck. It's skill and preparation and refusing to give up." She stood. "Rest for another hour. Then we have more work to do." That evening, as the sun set, Ada taught them about fire. Not just how to make one, but how to make one that wouldn't be seen from a distance. How to use rocks to hide the glow. How to choose wood that burned with minimal smoke. "Fire can save your life or end it," she explained. "It keeps you warm, cooks your food, purifies water. But it also announces your presence to anyone looking. You have to be smart about when and how you use it. She showed them how to build a Dakota fire pit, a small hole connected by a tunnel to an air intake hole, creating an efficient, nearly smokeless fire that was invisible from just a few yards away. As they worked, Owen asked the question Ada had been expecting. "Why are you doing all this? You could just turn us in, collect the reward, go back to your normal life." Ada paused in her work. All three boys were watching her now, waiting for her answer. "I had a daughter once," she said quietly. "Her name was Rose. She died when she was 2 years old. Fever took her, and I couldn't save her." The boys were silent, listening. "After she died, my husband blamed me. Maybe he was right to. I was her mother. I should have done anything different. Our marriage fell apart, and I came up here to these mountains to get away from everything. From the memories, from the guilt, from the life I'd failed at." She looked at each of them in turn. "For 7 years I've been alone up here. 7 years of just surviving, day to day, not really living. And then I found you three," and her voice caught. She cleared her throat, continued, "You reminded me what it feels like to care about something besides just making it to the next sunrise. You gave me a reason to be more than just a woman hiding from her past." "We're not your daughter," Sam said, but his voice was gentle, not cruel. "No," Ada agreed. "You're not. And I'm not trying to replace her. But maybe I can do right by you in a way I couldn't do for her. Maybe I can keep you safe, help you survive, give you the chance to grow up and claim what's rightfully yours." Henry reached out, put his hand over Ada's. "Thank you," he said simply. Ada nodded. Not trusting herself to speak, they finished the fire pit as darkness fell. Ada cooked a small meal, rabbit that Sam had helped her trap earlier in the week, and they ate in comfortable silence. After dinner, Ada brought out her rifle. It was a good weapon, well-maintained, accurate. She'd used it to hunt game for years, but now she needed Henry to learn to use it too. "Guns are serious business," she said. "You don't point one at anything you don't intend to shoot. You treat every gun as if it's loaded. And you never, ever pull the trigger unless you're sure of your target and what's beyond it." She showed Henry how to hold it properly, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger rather than pulling it. They didn't have ammunition to waste on practice shots, but he could learn the mechanics, the feel of the weapon, the weight of it. "If men come for us," Ada said seriously, "and if I can't stop them, you might have to use this." "I need to know you can if you must." Henry swallowed hard, but he nodded. "I can. If it means protecting Sam and Owen, I can do anything." "That's what your father's watch says," Ada reminded him. "He had faith in your courage." "So do I." They practiced for an hour, loading, unloading, aiming, dry firing with no ammunition. Henry's hands shook at first, but gradually he became more comfortable with the weapon. When they were done, Ada carefully cleaned and stored the rifle. Then she gathered all three boys together. "I need you to understand something," she said. "This isn't a game. The men looking for you, they won't hesitate to hurt anyone who gets in their way. If they find us, they'll kill me and take you, or they'll kill all of us and make it look like an accident. Vernon has already killed twice that we know of. He won't blink at killing again. Then why help us?" Owen asked, his voice small. "Because it's right," Ada said simply. "Because you're children and you deserve to be protected. Because your parents loved you and died trying to keep Vernon from destroying your family. And because," she smiled, surprising herself, "because I've grown fond of you three. You're stubborn and frustrating, and you eat more than seems possible for your size. But you're also brave and loyal and good. The world needs more people like that." Sam, who'd been so suspicious and guarded when they first met, moved closer to Ada and leaned against her side. She put an arm around him naturally, without thinking. "We'll be careful," Henry promised. "We'll learn everything you teach us. We won't let you down." "I know you won't," Ada said. That night, after the boys had climbed to the loft, Ada sat by the window again with her spyglass. The distant campfire was gone, but that didn't comfort her. It meant the searchers were moving, possibly getting closer. She thought about the choice she'd made, about the path she'd set them all on. There would be no going back now. She'd committed herself to these boys, to their survival, to their fight against Vernon. It was terrifying. It was dangerous. It was the most reckless thing she'd done in 7 years. It was also the most alive she'd felt since Rose died. She touched the small locket she wore around her neck, the one with Rose's picture inside. "I couldn't save you, baby girl," she whispered. "But maybe I can save them. Maybe that can mean something." Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow from the higher peaks. Winter was coming, and with it, new dangers and new challenges. But for the first time in years, Ada McCrae wasn't just surviving, she was fighting, and she would not lose. A week passed. The boys' transformation was remarkable. Their soft hands developed calluses. Their uncertain steps in the forest became more confident. They learned to distinguish between the call of a jay signaling danger and one simply announcing territory. They could start a fire in under 5 minutes, even with damp wood. Owen surprised them all. Despite his young age and small size, he had a gift for observation. He noticed things the others missed. A disturbed spiderweb across a game trail, indicating someone had passed through. The way moss grew thicker on the north side of trees. The subtle difference between a deer bed and a place where a person had rested. Sam became proficient with snares and traps. Ada showed him once, and he understood immediately, his clever fingers adapting the techniques, even improving on them. By the end of the week, he'd caught 3 rabbits and a grouse, proud as could be. Henry grew stronger with each passing day. The mountain air and hard work filled out his thin frame. He could split wood now without supervision, could carry water from the stream without spilling, could shoot Ada's rifle with reasonable accuracy, at least at the hay bale targets they'd set up behind the cabin. But it was Owen's drawings that proved most valuable. One evening, as they sat around the fire, Owen pulled out a stub of pencil and a piece of paper from his satchel. His hands moved quickly, surely, sketching from memory. Ada watched over his shoulder, impressed. The child had real talent. He was drawing a house, no, a manor, large and elegant, with detailed architectural features. "That's your home?" she asked. Owen nodded, not looking up from his work. "Thornhill Manor. I drew it lots of times before everything happened. It helps me remember." As the drawing took shape, Ada noticed something. "These windows here, they're different from the others." "That's Papa's study," Owen explained. "The windows have special glass colored on the edges. Mama said it was imported from somewhere far away." Henry came to look. "I'd forgotten about those windows." "Owen, you've got every detail right. Even the chimney is exactly the right height compared to the roof line." "I remember everything," Owen said quietly. "I don't want to forget." Ada studied the drawing more carefully. "These details, you could prove you lived there with this?" "Anyone could describe a big house, but these specifics, the window glass, the chimney proportions, what else?" Owen started pointing. "The rose garden had this pattern. Mama designed it herself. And there's a loose stone in the back wall, 3rd from the left on the bottom row, where Papa hid a key. And in the library there's a painting of a ship, and if you press the frame just right, it opens to show a safe." "A safe?" Ada's attention sharpened. "Did you ever see inside it?" "A few times. Papa kept important papers there. And Mama's good jewelry, the pieces from her grandmother." Henry looked at Ada, understanding dawning. "You think there might be more evidence there? More papers showing what Vernon did?" "Maybe," Ada said. "Or maybe just more proof that you boys are who you say you are. Vernon could claim the documents in your satchel were stolen or forged. But knowledge like this, knowledge only the family would have, that's harder to fake." She made Owen draw several more pictures over the next hour. The layout of the rooms, the garden paths, the stable where their horses had been kept. Every detail he could remember. "These are good, Owen," Ada said, carefully storing the drawings with the other documents. "These could be important someday." The next morning, Ada woke them before dawn again. "Today I have to go down the mountain. Silas is due with supplies at the meeting point. I need to go alone. 4 people moving through the forest make 4 times the noise, and 4 times the chance of being seen. What if something happens?" Henry asked, worry clear in his voice. "Then you wait here for 2 days. Ada said firmly. If I'm not back in 2 days, you take your packs and head higher into the mountains. There's a cave. I've told you about it. You go there and you wait. Don't try to come looking for me, and don't go down to the valley. Understand? All 3 boys nodded, though none looked happy about it. Good, Henry, you're in charge. Sam, you help him. Oh, and you do what your brothers tell you. Keep the fire small and hidden. Don't go more than 100 yards from the cabin. And if you hear anyone coming, anyone at all, you hide. Don't wait to see who it is. Just hide. She packed light, just her walking stick, a knife, and a canvas bag for the supplies. The meeting point was a 2-hour walk down the mountain, in a small clearing that was visible from several approaches, but hidden from casual travelers. The walk down was peaceful. The forest was beautiful in the early morning light, the aspens golden and trembling in the slight breeze. Ada moved quietly out of habit, her eyes constantly scanning for danger. She reached the clearing an hour before Silas was due. Good. It gave her time to scout the area, make sure no one was watching or waiting. She found a good vantage point on a small rise and settled in to observe. Silas arrived exactly on time. He was an old man, nearly 70, with a white beard and a back bent from years of hard work. But his eyes were sharp and his mind was sharper. He'd been bringing supplies to mountain dwellers for 40 years, and he knew how to be discreet. Ada waited another 15 minutes, watching to make sure he was alone before she revealed herself. Ada, Silas greeted her, relief in his voice. I was worried. Things are stirred up down in the valley. Tell me, Ada said, getting straight to business. Silas unloaded his pack, flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, as he talked. About 2 weeks ago, a group of men came through. 8 or 9 of them, well armed, carrying money. They've been asking about 3 boys, showing a description, offering rewards for information. Ada's stomach tightened. How much? Started at $500. Now it's up to 1,000. Silas shook his head. That's more money than most folks around here see in 5 years. It's making people look hard at every child they see. What else? They've been methodical about it. Started in Helena, worked their way through all the nearby settlements. Now they're moving into the mountain areas. I heard they hired some trackers, men who know these woods. Ada cursed under her breath. Trackers were dangerous. They'd be able to read signs that regular searchers would miss. There's more, Silas continued, his expression grave. The man leading them calls himself Garrett. He's got a reputation. Used to work for the Pinkertons before they fired him for being too rough. And Vernon hired him, Ada said. Seems so. They've been showing a photograph, not of the boys, but of their parents, asking if anyone's seen children who look like them. Silas paused. Ada, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but this isn't going to end well if you're hiding something. Ada made a decision. Silas had been good to her over the years, and she trusted him more than most. I found 3 boys lost in the woods. They're the ones being hunted, and they have good reason to run from the man looking for them. Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. I was afraid of that. Ada, $1,000. People will sell their souls for that kind of money. I know. That's why I need you to keep quiet about seeing me. About knowing where I am. I always have, Silas said. But Ada, even I might not be able to resist if they push hard enough. I've got grandchildren to think about, a wife who needs medicine I can barely afford. Ada understood. She couldn't ask him to risk everything for her. I won't put you in that position. This is the last time we meet. You don't know where I am. You haven't seen me in months. If they question you, you tell them the truth, that I live somewhere in the mountains, but you don't know exactly where. Silas nodded slowly. What will you do? Whatever I have to, Ada said. Those boys are innocent, and I won't let them be hurt. She paid him more than the supplies were worth and added extra. For your grandchildren. And for your silence. Silas took the money, met her eyes. You're a good woman, Ada McCrae. I hope you know that. Whatever happened before, whatever you're running from, you're a good woman. Thank you, Silas. They parted ways. Ada watched him disappear down the trail, then waited another hour before starting her return journey. She took a different path, doubling back several times, making sure she wasn't followed. As she climbed higher, her mind worked through what she'd learned. Trackers, $1,000 reward, men who wouldn't hesitate to use force. The situation was worse than she'd thought. She was a mile from the cabin when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong. The snap of a branch, too loud to be an animal, too heavy to be the wind. Ada froze, every sense alert. She slowly, carefully moved behind a large boulder, peering out to scan the forest. There, movement through the trees. Two men on horseback moving slowly, searching. Her heart hammered. They were too close, far too close. She watched as they stopped, one man dismounting to examine something on the ground. A track, evidence of passage? She couldn't tell from this distance. They were heading in roughly the direction of her cabin. Ada weighed her options. She could try to lead them away, make noise in a different direction. But that might just bring more attention to the area. She could circle around, get back to the cabin first. Warn the boys. That was the better choice, moving with all the stealth she'd learned over 7 years in these mountains. Ada worked her way through the forest, giving the men a wide berth. It took an extra hour, but she made it back to the cabin unseen. She came in fast, her supplies still on her back. "Boys, we've got trouble." They jumped up from where they'd been studying Owen's drawings. "What happened?" Henry asked. "Two men on horseback, less than a mile from here. They're searching systematically and they're too close. We might need to move." "Now?" Sam asked. "Maybe. Let me think." Ada moved to the window, looking out carefully. "They were heading south when I saw them. If they continue that direction, they'll miss us. But if they circle back—" She didn't finish the sentence. They all understood. "We should pack," Henry said. "Be ready just in case." "Good thinking. Do it quietly." "And Owen—" "I'll get the satchel," Owen said immediately. They spent the next hour in tense preparation. Every sound from outside made them freeze. Every bird call could be a signal. Every snap of a twig could be a footstep. As afternoon faded into evening, Ada kept watch from different windows, the rifle close at hand. The boys stayed quiet, waiting, their packs ready by the door. Darkness fell. No one came, but Ada couldn't shake the feeling that their time in the cabin was running out. The searchers were getting closer. The net was tightening. That night, as the boys finally fell asleep in the loft, Ada made plans. They'd give it 2 more days. If there were any more signs of searchers nearby, they'd move to the high cave. It would be harder living, colder, more exposed, less comfortable. But it would be safer. She thought about Silas's words. $1,000. That was enough to tempt almost anyone. They were running out of time, running out of safety, running out of places to hide. But as she looked at the sleeping boys, Sam curled on his side, Owen with his satchel clutched even in sleep, Henry with his father's watch under his pillow, Ada knew she'd made the right choice. She would protect them, no matter what it cost. The search was closing in, but they weren't caught yet. And Ada McCrae, who'd spent 7 years learning how to survive in these mountains, wasn't about to surrender now. Tomorrow, she'd start preparing the high cave. Tomorrow, she'd plan their route, cache supplies, ready everything for a quick departure. Tonight, she'd keep watch, and she'd pray that 2 more days would be enough. 2 weeks had passed since Ada's meeting with Silas. 2 weeks of constant vigilance, of teaching and preparing, of watching the forest for any sign of danger. The aspens had lost most of their leaves now, and the first real snow had dusted the higher peaks. Autumn was dying, and winter was coming fast. The boys had adapted remarkably well. They could move through the forest like shadows now, could read weather signs, could find food and water in places most people would see only wilderness. They were becoming children of the mountain, shaped by necessity into something harder and more capable than they'd been. But Ada saw the cost too. Owen had nightmares most nights, waking with muffled cries that Henry soothed with whispered words. Sam had grown quieter, more watchful, his boyish energy tempered by constant awareness of danger. Henry carried the weight of responsibility like a physical burden. His shoulders tense, his eyes always alert. They were growing up too fast, forced into maturity by circumstance. One morning, as Ada was organizing supplies, Owen came down from the loft carrying something carefully. He held it out to her, a small silver locket on a delicate chain. "I found this in your drawer," he said, his voice apologetic. "I was looking for extra pencils to draw with, and I saw it. I'm sorry for going through your things," Ada's breath caught. The locket. Rose's locket. She'd kept it hidden for 7 years, unable to look at it but unable to let it go. "It's all right," she said softly, taking it from him. The silver was tarnished but still beautiful. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a small photograph, faded now but still clear. Rose at 18 months, her face lit with laughter, her tiny hands reaching toward whoever held the camera. Ada, probably. She'd always been the one taking pictures. "Who is she?" Owen asked gently. Ada looked at the 3 boys gathered around her. They'd shared so much with her, their fear, their loss, their trust. They deserved the truth. "This is my daughter," Ada said, her voice steady despite the pain in her chest. Her name was Rose, she told them then, the full story. About Rose's birth, about 2 years of joy so complete it hurt to remember. About the fever that came on suddenly, burning her baby from the inside. About 3 days of desperate attempts to break it, cold cloths, medicines from the doctor, prayers to a God who didn't answer, about holding Rose as she died, feeling the life leave that small body, and knowing she'd failed at the most important task a mother had. "My husband. Thomas, he couldn't look at me after that," Ada continued. "Every time he saw me, he saw the woman who'd let their daughter die. Maybe he was right. Maybe I missed signs. Maybe I waited too long to get help. I don't know any more." "It wasn't your fault," Henry said firmly. "Fever takes children sometimes. My mother told me that once. She said it's the cruelest thing in the world. But it's not anyone's fault." Ada smiled sadly at him. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Owen whispered. "After Rose died, Thomas started drinking," Ada went on. "We stopped talking, stopped touching, stopped being anything to each other except reminders of what we'd lost. Finally, he left. Moved to California, I heard later. Married someone else. Started fresh. And you came here," Sam said. "I came here. Sold everything, bought supplies and a few tools, walked into these mountains and built that cabin. I told myself I was starting over too, but really, I was just hiding. Hiding from the world, from my grief, from myself." She looked at each of them. "For 7 years I've been up here alone, and I thought that was what I wanted. Thought that was what I deserved. Then I found you 3 and—" Her voice broke. She cleared her throat, continued. "You reminded me what it feels like to care about someone. To want to protect someone, to have a reason to keep going beyond just surviving another day." Owen moved closer, wrapped his small arms around her waist. "We're glad you found us." Ada hugged him back, tears streaming down her face. Sam joined them, then Henry, until all 4 of them were holding each other in the middle of the cabin, bound together by shared loss and shared hope. "I couldn't save Rose," Ada said into the silence. "But I can save you. I will save you. That's my promise." They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Ada gently disentangled herself, wiped her eyes and smiled. "Enough sadness. We have work to do." But something had shifted between them. The boys had been her responsibility before. Now they felt like family. That afternoon, disaster nearly struck. Sam had gone out to check his snare line, something he did every day now. Ada had just finished preparing lunch when she heard him calling from outside, his voice urgent but controlled. "Ada, you need to see this." She grabbed her rifle and hurried out. Sam was standing at the edge of the clearing, pointing down the slope. There, clearly visible in the soft earth, was a boot print, fresh, less than an hour old. Ada's blood ran cold. She knelt, examined it carefully. Adult male, probably over 6 feet tall, judging by the depth and stride. Moving uphill toward the cabin. "Get your brothers," she said quietly. "Get the packs. We may need to leave right now." Sam ran back to the cabin. Ada followed the tracks with her eyes. They led up from the valley, but there was only one set. A scout, maybe? Or someone who'd gotten separated from a larger group. Either way, it meant they'd been found. Inside the cabin, organized chaos erupted. The boys grabbed their packs, checked their supplies. Ada threw together what food she could quickly carry. She took the rifle, her knife, the spyglass. The cave, Henry asked. The cave, Ada confirmed. We go now, we go fast. No talking until we're at least 2 miles away. They filed out of the cabin. Ada took one last look at the place that had been her home for 7 years. She'd built it with her own hands, survived countless storms within its walls, found peace in its solitude. Now she was leaving it behind. She closed the door gently, then grabbed a branch and quickly swept away the most obvious signs of their departure from the immediate area. It wouldn't fool a good tracker for long, but it might buy them a few hours. They moved into the forest in single file, Ada in front, then Owen, then Sam, with Henry bringing up the rear. Ada set a hard pace, faster than was comfortable, but speed was more important than stealth now. They climbed higher, into terrain that grew increasingly rocky and steep. The boys kept up without complaint, their weeks of training paying off. Even Owen, though his face was red with effort, didn't ask to slow down. After an hour, Ada called a brief halt. They crouched behind a tumble of boulders while she scanned their back trail with the spyglass. Nothing, no movement, no signs of pursuit, but that didn't mean they were safe. Keep moving, she said. Another hour, then we rest properly. The terrain grew more challenging. They had to scramble over rocks, duck under low branches, ford a small stream that ran cold with snowmelt. The boys were tiring. Ada could see it in their movements, but they pushed on. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they reached the cave. It wasn't much to look at, just a dark opening in the rock face, partially hidden by scrubby pines. But Ada had prepared it years ago as an emergency shelter, and she'd stocked it with a few essentials. They ducked inside. The cave was about 12 feet deep and 8 feet wide, with a low ceiling that forced adults to stoop. But it was dry, sheltered from the wind, and most importantly, nearly impossible to find if you didn't know it was there. Ada got the boys settled while there was still light. She showed them where she'd cached supplies in a waterproof box, dried food, a flint and steel, a few blankets. Not much, but enough to survive on for a while. We'll stay here tonight, she said. No fire, it's too dangerous. We eat cold food and we stay quiet. Tomorrow I'll scout back toward the cabin, see if we were followed. What if you were? Henry asked. Then we stay here longer. If they find the cabin, they'll search the area, but this cave is well hidden. As long as we're quiet and careful, we should be safe. Night fell quickly in the mountains. They ate a cold meal of dried meat and hard bread, then huddled together for warmth under the blankets. The temperature was dropping fast. Ada guessed it would be near freezing by morning. Owen shivered, despite being wrapped in a blanket. Ada pulled him close, sharing her body heat. Sam pressed against her other side. Henry sat slightly apart, keeping watch at the cave entrance, his father's watch clutched in his hand. "Tell us about your life before the mountains," Sam said quietly. "Not the sad parts. The good parts," Ada thought back, searching for memories that didn't hurt. "I grew up in a small town in Wyoming. My father was a carpenter, my mother tended a big garden. I had 2 older brothers who tormented me constantly, but would fight anyone else who tried." "What were their names?" Owen asked. "James and William. Last I heard, James was ranching up north somewhere. William went east, became a teacher. We lost touch years ago." She paused, surprised by the sadness that brought. "I should have written them. After Rose died, I mean. I couldn't face anyone from my old life. Maybe someday you can," Henry said softly. When this is over. As if there would be an after to this nightmare they were living. "Maybe," Ada agreed. Though she didn't believe it, they talked quietly for another hour, small memories, gentle stories, anything to distract from the cold and fear. Finally, exhaustion claimed the boys, and they slept. Ada stayed awake, watching the entrance to the cave, listening to the night sounds of the mountain. An owl called in the distance. The wind whispered through the pines. Somewhere far off, a branch snapped, just a natural sound, but it made her grip the rifle tighter. She thought about the cabin, about whether it was being searched right now. She thought about the boot print, about the man who'd made it, about how close they'd come to being caught. She thought about Rose, buried in the valley below, and about these 3 boys pressed against her in the darkness, trusting her to keep them safe. "I won't let them take you," she whispered. I swear it. The wind picked up, howling outside the cave. Ada pulled the blankets tighter around the sleeping boys and settled in for a long, cold night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, they were safe. Tonight, that would have to be enough. As the hours crept by and the temperature continued to drop, Ada found her mind wandering to dark places. What if they couldn't go back to the cabin? What if they were trapped up here for the winter? They had limited supplies, limited shelter. Could they survive until spring? And even if they survived, what then? Vernon would never stop looking. The reward would keep growing. Eventually someone would find them, would sell them out. They couldn't run forever. But Ada pushed those thoughts away. Survival meant taking things one day at a time. Worrying about next month did nothing to help them survive tonight. She pulled the silver locket from her pocket, opened it in the darkness. She couldn't see Rose's picture, but she knew it was there. Her baby girl, forever frozen at 18 months, forever smiling. "I'm trying to do better this time," she whispered to the photograph. "I'm trying to save them like I couldn't save you. I hope that matters." The wind answered with a low moan, and Ada McCrae, who'd spent 7 years running from the past, held 3 sleeping children close and faced the uncertain future with the only weapon she had left: stubborn, desperate love. Morning came cold and grey. Ada woke stiff and sore from sleeping on stone, her breath misting in the frigid air. The boys were still asleep, huddled together like puppies seeking warmth. She carefully extricated herself without waking them and moved to the cave entrance. During the night, a light snow had fallen, just an inch or so, but enough to blanket the landscape in white, enough to show tracks clearly. Ada studied the pristine snow carefully. No footprints, no disturbances. If anyone had come this way during the night, they'd left no trace. That was something, at least. She let the boys sleep another hour while she kept watch. When they finally stirred, she had cold rations ready and a plan formed. "I'm going back to scout the cabin," she told them. "You 3 will stay here. Owen, you're in charge of keeping watch. Sam, you set up your alarm system, those bells and string tricks you've been practicing. Henry, you're responsible for everyone's safety. If anyone comes, anyone at all, you go deeper into the cave system." "Deeper?" Henry asked. "I didn't know it went deeper." "It does. About 50 feet back, there's a narrow passage. It's tight, especially for me, but you 3 can fit. It leads to a smaller chamber. If you hear anything suspicious, you go there, and you stay silent until I come back." "What if you don't come back?" Sam asked bluntly. Ada met his eyes. "If I'm not back by sundown tomorrow, you wait 1 more day. Then you start moving south, staying high in the mountains. There's a trading post about 40 miles from here. A man named Joseph runs it. He knew my father. Tell him Ada McCrae sent you and that you need help getting to Helena. He'll know what to do." She'd written the instructions down on a piece of paper, folded it, and given it to Henry. "Keep this safe. I don't think you'll need it, but just in case." Henry took the paper with trembling hands. "Be careful." "Always am," Ada said, managing a smile. She left them there, disappearing into the snowy forest like a ghost. The trek back to the cabin took 3 hours. She moved slowly, carefully, checking every sight line, watching for any sign of human presence. When she finally got close enough to see the cabin through the trees, she stopped and observed for a full hour. No smoke from the chimney, no movement, no horses, no sounds except the wind and the occasional bird. Finally she crept closer. The cabin door stood open. Ada's heart sank. She'd left it closed. Someone had definitely been here. She approached with extreme caution, rifle ready. At the door she paused, listening. Nothing. She peered inside. The cabin had been searched, but not ransacked. Whoever had done it had been methodical. Her supplies were disturbed but not destroyed. The loft had been examined. She could see where someone had climbed up and moved things around, but they hadn't found anything useful. The boys' belongings were all in their packs. Ada's personal items told no story about 3 missing children. She moved through the space carefully, looking for signs of how many men had been here. At least 3, she decided. Maybe 4. They'd been thorough but not destructive. Professional, not angry. That matched what Silas had said about Garrett, the ex-Pinkerton man. He would search methodically, looking for evidence rather than just tearing things apart. Outside, she found what she was looking for: tracks in the snow. 4 men, just as she'd guessed. They'd come from the south, searched the cabin, then headed northwest, away from the cave. That was lucky. If they'd gone northeast instead, they might have found the trail leading to the boys' hiding place. Ada followed the tracks for a mile, staying well back, just making sure of their direction. They were moving systematically, searching in a grid pattern. Smart. Eventually they'd cover every square mile of this mountain. She needed to warn the boys. They couldn't stay at the cave indefinitely, but she also needed information. Where were these men camping? How many were there in total? What were their plans? She made a dangerous decision. She would follow them. For the next 6 hours, Ada tracked the 4 men through the forest. She stayed far back, using every skill she'd learned over 7 years of mountain living. They were good, better than she'd expected, but she was better. This was her mountain, and she knew it like the back of her hand. By late afternoon, she found their camp. It was well chosen, in a natural clearing, with good sight lines and access to water. She counted 8 men in total, plus horses and substantial supplies. They weren't planning on leaving any time soon. From her hidden vantage point behind a fallen log, Ada studied them through her spyglass. Most were rough-looking types, hired guns, probably, men who worked for money and didn't ask questions. But one man stood out. He was tall, well-dressed even in outdoor clothing, with graying hair and a military bearing. He carried himself like someone used to giving orders and having them obeyed. As she watched, the other men deferred to him, waiting for his instructions. That had to be Garrett. Ada watched as he spread a map on a flat rock, the other men gathering around. He pointed to different areas, assigning search zones. Even from a distance, she could see the methodical nature of his plan. He was dividing the mountain into sections, ensuring every area would be covered. It was only a matter of time before they found the cave. She needed to get the boys out of there. Tonight, if possible. But as she started to creep away, she heard something that made her freeze. "The old woman who lives up here," Garrett was saying, his voice carrying in the still air. "We need to find her too. If she's seen the boys, she might be hiding them. What if she won't talk?" One of the other men asked. "Then we make her talk," Garrett said flatly. "Vernon doesn't care about collateral damage. He wants those boys found, and he wants them found quickly. Anyone helping them, anyone at all, is an obstacle to be removed." Ada's blood ran cold. They weren't just looking for the boys. They were looking for her. And Garrett had just made it clear he had no qualms about hurting people to get what he wanted. She'd known the danger intellectually, but hearing it stated so baldly made it real in a new way. She crept away from the camp, her mind racing. They had to move tonight. Had to get the boys somewhere safer, somewhere these men wouldn't think to look. But where? The cave was the most hidden place she knew. Where else could they go? As she made her way back toward the cave, a plan began forming. It was risky, maybe suicidal, but it might be their only chance. They would have to go down the mountain instead of staying up high, down into the valley where no one would expect them to be. It was counterintuitive, but that's what might make it work, and there was someone in the valley who might help them. Someone she hadn't seen in 7 years, but who had once been a friend. It was a long shot. But long shots were all they had left. She reached the cave just as the sun was setting. Sam's alarm system, thin strings stretched across the approach with small bells attached, alerted the boys to her presence. She saw Henry's face appear at the cave entrance, relief flooding his features when he recognized her. "You're back," he said, helping her inside. "We need to talk," Ada said.
"All of you."
"And then we need to move." She told them what she'd seen, what she'd heard. The boys' faces grew pale as they understood the full extent of the danger. "They're going to find this place eventually," Ada concluded. "We can't stay here. We need to do something they won't expect." "What?" Sam asked. "We go down. We go into the valley to the town. We hide where they've already looked." "That's crazy," Sam said. "That's where they are. That's why it might work," Ada countered. "They're searching up here in the wilderness. They think you're hiding in the mountains because that's what makes sense. But if we can get down without being seen, if we can hide in plain sight, how? Henry asked. We can't just walk into town. Someone will recognize us. The reward, I know someone, Ada said. A woman named Ruth. She ran a boarding house when I left. She's a good person. I think she'd help us. You think? Sam's voice was sharp with fear and anger. You're betting our lives on think? I'm betting your lives on the fact that 8 armed men are systematically searching this mountain and will find you within a week if we stay here. Ada shot back. Yes, going down is risky, but staying here is certain death. We need to choose the lesser risk. The boys looked at each other, having one of their silent conversations. Finally, Henry nodded. When do we leave? Tonight. We move in the darkness when they won't expect it. We take a route that's dangerous, steep, difficult, because they won't think we'd risk it. We get down into the valley before dawn, before they start their daily search pattern, and if this Ruth won't help us... Owen asked, his voice small. Ada knelt down to his level. Then we figure out something else. But Owen, we're running out of options. We have to try. He nodded bravely, clutching his satchel. They spent the next hour preparing. Ada distributed what little food they had left. She made sure everyone's packs were secure, that they had warm clothes, that the precious documents were safe in Owen's satchel as full darkness fell. She pulled out her father's compass, a beautiful brass instrument that had guided her through countless mountain journeys. She showed the boys how to read it, how the needle always pointed north. This will guide us down, she said. We head southeast toward the valley. It's about 8 miles as the crow flies, but the terrain is rough. It'll take us most of the night. What about the men? Henry asked. Won't they have sentries? Probably. But they'll be watching the upper trails, the routes they think we'd use. We're going down the steep way, through terrain they won't expect anyone to attempt in the dark. It was dangerous. One wrong step could mean a fall, broken bones, death. But the alternative was waiting here to be found. They set out just after full dark. The moon was only a thin crescent providing minimal light. That was both good and bad. Good because it made them harder to see. Bad because it made the treacherous descent even more dangerous. Ada led, testing each step, finding handholds in the rock, guiding the boys down impossibly steep sections. They moved in complete silence, communicating only through touch and gesture. Owen struggled the most, his short legs making the descent difficult. Henry stayed close to him, sometimes lifting him over obstacles. Sam moved with surprising agility, his small size an advantage in the tight passages. They'd been descending for 2 hours when disaster nearly struck. Owen's foot slipped on loose scree. He started to slide, scrabbling for purchase. Henry lunged, caught his jacket, held on while Owen's feet kicked in empty air. Ada moved quickly, reaching down to grab Owen's arm. Together, she and Henry hauled him back to safety. Owen was crying silently, terrified. Ada held him for a moment, let him catch his breath, then whispered in his ear. You're doing so well. Just a little further. You can do this. He nodded against her shoulder, wiped his eyes, and they continued. The descent seemed to take forever. Every muscle in Ada's body screamed with effort. The boys had to be exhausted, but they pushed on without complaint. Finally, as the eastern sky began to show the first hint of grey, they reached the bottom of the steep section. Ahead lay forest, then eventually the valley floor and the town beyond. They'd made it down. Now came the even more dangerous part, getting to Ruth's boarding house without being seen. Ada gathered the boys close. When we reach the edge of town, we go quietly and quickly. No talking, no running. We move like we belong there. Ruth's place is on the east side, away from the main street. If we're lucky, we can get there before too many people are awake. And if we're not lucky, Sam asked. Ada met his eyes honestly. Then we run, and we pray we're faster than they are. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. As dawn broke over the valley, 4 fugitives made their way toward town, carrying hope and fear in equal measure, and trusting everything to the kindness of a woman Ada hadn't seen in 7 years. The game was about to change. One way or another, this couldn't go on much longer. Ada just prayed they'd survive what came next. They reached the outskirts of town just as the sun cleared the eastern mountains. Ada's heart pounded as they moved between buildings, staying in shadows, avoiding the main street where early risers might spot them. The town had grown since she'd left 7 years ago. New buildings lined streets that had once been dirt tracks. But the boarding house was still there, its familiar blue shutters and wide front porch exactly as she remembered. Ada led the boys around to the back door, praying Ruth still lived here, praying she'd help, praying they hadn't made a fatal mistake coming down from the mountain. She knocked softly, 3 quick taps, then 2, then 3 again. It was an old signal from years ago, when she and Ruth had been close friends. Would Ruth even remember? The door opened a crack. A woman's face appeared, older than Ada remembered, with more grey in her hair and lines around her eyes. But it was Ruth. Recognition flashed across her face. Ada McCrae? "Lord in heaven, I thought you were dead. I need help," Ada said simply. "Can we come in?" Ruth's eyes took in the 3 boys, their exhausted faces, their fear. Something shifted in her expression. Quickly, they hurried inside. Ruth locked the door behind them, pulled the curtains closed. "You've brought trouble," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes," Ada admitted. "Big trouble. If you can't help, just tell me now and we'll leave." "I won't hold it against you." Ruth studied them for a long moment. And then she sighed. "I've got biscuits and eggs. You all look half-starved. Sit down and eat while you tell me what's going on." Over breakfast, the first hot meal they'd had in days, Ada told the story. She kept it simple and honest. 3 boys whose parents were murdered for money. A corrupt uncle hunting them. Ada's decision to protect them. Ruth listened without interrupting. When Ada finished, she sat back in her chair. "I heard about men asking questions, offering rewards. There's been talk all through town." "I know it's asking a lot," Ada said, "but I didn't know where else to turn." "You're asking me to hide 3 children who have $1,000 reward on their heads," Ruth said flatly. "Men have killed for less." "I know, and if we're caught, I'd lose everything. This house, my business, possibly my freedom." "I know," Ada repeated. She stood. "Come on, boys. We'll figure something else out." "Sit down," Ruth said, a hint of amusement in her voice. "I didn't say I wouldn't help. I just wanted you to understand what you're asking." Ada sat slowly. "You'll help us?" "Those boys' parents were murdered," Ruth said, "and their uncle is hunting them to cover up his crimes. Of course I'll help. What kind of person would I be if I didn't?" Relief flooded through Ada so powerfully she felt dizzy. Owen started crying again, tears of exhaustion and relief. Ruth moved to him immediately, pulling him into a hug. "It's all right, little one. You're safe here, all of you." They spent that day hiding in Ruth's attic, a space she'd converted into a small apartment for long-term boarders. It was cramped but clean, with 2 beds and a small sitting area. More importantly, it was invisible from outside and accessed only through a hidden staircase behind a false wall in the 2nd-floor linen closet. "I had this built during the war," Ruth explained, "for reasons that don't matter now. But it's come in handy over the years." The boys fell asleep almost immediately, their exhaustion finally catching up with them. Ada stayed awake, too keyed up to rest despite her own weariness. Ruth brought her tea and sat down. "You look like hell, Ada." "Feel like it too," Ada admitted. 7 years you've been gone. 7 years without a word. I thought, well, after what happened with Rose and Thomas, I thought you might have done something desperate." "I thought about it," Ada said honestly, "but I'm too stubborn to die that easily." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Ruth spoke again. "What's your plan? You can't hide here forever." "I know. We need to get them to Helena. There's a judge there, someone who might help if we can present the evidence the boys have. Helena's 90 miles from here, and those men searching for the boys. They'll be watching the roads." Ada knew she was right. They'd made it off the mountain, but they were still trapped. She was pondering this problem when Owen woke from his nap. He wandered over, still clutching his satchel as always, and climbed into Ada's lap. "Is this place safe?" he asked sleepily. "Safe enough for now," Ada assured him. Owen opened his satchel, pulled out his drawings, the ones of Thornhill Manor he'd been working on. Can I draw Miss Ruth's house too? So I remember it? Of course you can, Ruth said, finding him paper and a pencil. As Owen drew, his small hands moving with surprising skill across the page, Sam woke up and joined them. He watched his brother work for a moment, then frowned. Owen, is that the satchel Papa gave you? The leather one? Yes, Owen said, not looking up from his drawing. I always wondered why that one. We all had bags, but Papa made sure you got that specific one. The leather one with the brass buckles. Ada's attention sharpened.
What do you mean, made sure?
Sam shrugged. The day before they died. Papa called Owen into his study. When Owen came out, he had this bag. Papa told him to keep it safe, to keep his drawings in it. Ada looked at the satchel with new eyes. Owen, let me see that bag. He handed it over trustingly. Ada examined it carefully. It was good leather, well made, with a stiff bottom and sides. She pressed on the bottom, solid. She ran her fingers along the seams, feeling for, there, a slight irregularity in the stitching along the bottom edge. Do you have a seam ripper? She asked Ruth. Ruth fetched one from her sewing kit. Ada carefully worked the stitching loose, her heart pounding. The boys crowded around watching. The seam opened. Inside the lining, sewn into a hidden pocket, was a folded document. With trembling hands, Ada pulled it out. It was legal paper, thick and official-looking. She unfolded it carefully. Dear God, she breathed. It was a codicil to Jonathan Thornhill's will, dated 3 days before his death. Signed, notarized, legally binding, and it changed everything, Ada read aloud, her voice shaking. Being of sound mind and increasingly concerned about my brother Vernon's management of family assets, I hereby make the following amendments to my will. In the event of my death, primary guardianship of my sons Henry, Samuel, and Owen shall pass not to my brother Vernon Thornhill, but to Judge Marcus Abernathy of Helena, Montana, a man of integrity whom I trust to protect my children's interests. She paused, then continued. Furthermore, I direct Judge Abernathy to conduct a full audit of all estate accounts managed by Vernon Thornhill. I have documented evidence contained in Safety Deposit Box 247 at Helena National Bank of systematic embezzlement dating back 7 years. This evidence should be presented to proper authorities. The room was silent. Then Henry spoke, his voice hollow. He knew. Papa knew Uncle Vernon was stealing. And he knew Vernon was dangerous. That's why he hid this, Ada said, examining the document more closely. He didn't trust anyone with it except you, Owen. He put it in your bag because he knew you'd never let it go. There's more, Ruth said, pointing to the bottom of the page. Look, Ada read the final paragraph. I make these changes in secret because I believe my brother has become aware of my investigation and may take action against me. If anything should happen to me or my wife Elizabeth before I can confront Vernon publicly, let this document stand as evidence of my concerns and as protection for my sons. Signed, Jonathan Thornhill, witnessed by Father Michael O'Brien and Dr. Samuel Harrison. He knew Vernon was going to kill them, Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. He knew, and he tried to protect us. Ada's mind was racing. This changed everything. The will gave them an alternative guardian, a judge, no less. Someone with authority and, according to Jonathan's assessment, integrity. And it pointed to more evidence in a bank in Helena. We have to get to Helena, she said. We have to get this to Judge Abernathy. And the bank, Henry added. Whatever's in that safety deposit box, we need it. Ruth had been quiet, but now she spoke. There's a problem. A big one. Getting to Helena was already dangerous. Now you've got a document that proves Vernon killed your parents. If he even suspects it exists, he'll do anything to stop us from reaching the judge. Ida finished. We can't just hire a wagon or take the train. He'll have people watching. They sat in heavy silence, the weight of their situation pressing down on them. They had the evidence they needed to bring Vernon to justice, but only if they could survive long enough to deliver it. The key, Owen said suddenly. There's a key, too. He reached into the satchel's hidden pocket and pulled out a small brass key with a tag attached. The tag read, Helena National Bank, Box 247, Ada. Took it carefully as if it might break. This tiny piece of brass might be the key, literally, to the boys' survival and Vernon's downfall. "We need to think this through carefully," she said. "We can't afford mistakes. Vernon has men, money, and influence. We have the truth, but we need to get it to someone who can act on it." "Judge Abernathy," Henry said. "Papa trusted him. We have to trust him too." "Helena is 90 miles away," Ruth reminded them. "You're exhausted, you're being hunted, and winter is coming." "How exactly do you plan to get there?" Ada thought about the terrain, the risks, the men searching for them. She thought about Garrett and his methodical approach, about the reward money that would tempt so many people. And she thought about 3 boys who deserved justice for their murdered parents. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But we'll figure it out. We have to." As evening fell, Ruth brought them dinner, hot stew and fresh bread. The boys ate like they were starving, which they probably were. Ada picked at her food, her mind elsewhere. The hidden will changed everything. It proved Jonathan had known Vernon was dangerous. It provided an alternative guardian with legal authority. It pointed to more evidence that could fully expose Vernon's crimes, but it also made them even more valuable targets. If Vernon even suspected this document existed, he wouldn't stop until he found it. And anyone helping them would be in danger too. Ada looked at Ruth, who was laughing at something Sam had said. Ruth, who'd opened her home without hesitation. Ruth, who was risking everything to help them. "You should leave town," Ada told her later when the boys were asleep. "Once we go, Vernon will figure out someone helped us." "He might come after you," Ruth smiled. "I'm an old woman, Ada. I've survived a war, a fire, 3 husbands, and more heartbreak than I care to count. I'm not afraid of some greedy man who murders children. He's dangerous. So am I when someone threatens people I care about." Ruth squeezed Ada's hand. "You focus on getting those boys to safety. Let me worry about myself." Ada wanted to argue, but she could see the determination in Ruth's eyes. She'd forgotten how stubborn her old friend could be. That night, lying on a pallet on the floor while the boys slept in the beds, Ada held the hidden will and read it again by candlelight. Jonathan Thornhill's words reached across the grave, still trying to protect his sons. He'd failed to save himself and his wife, but he'd given his children a fighting chance. Now it was up to Ada to make sure that chance wasn't wasted. She thought about the journey ahead, 90 miles through country where Vernon's men were searching. She thought about winter closing in, about the risks and the impossible odds, and she thought about a judge in Helena who might be their only hope for justice. "We'll get there," she whispered to the sleeping boys. "I promise you. We'll get there, and we'll make Vernon pay for what he did." The candle flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Somewhere out there, 8 men were still searching for them. Vernon Thornhill was planning his next move, and time was running out, but Ada McCrae had spent 7 years learning to survive against impossible odds. Now she'd teach these boys to do more than just survive. She'd teach them to fight back. They spent 3 days in Ruth's attic, planning and preparing. 3 days, while Ada and Ruth worked out every detail of the journey to Helena. 3 days, while the boys rested, regained their strength, and tried not to think about what lay ahead. On the first morning, Ada pulled out her father's compass and showed the boys how to use it properly, not just reading the direction, but understanding declination, following a bearing, using it to navigate when all other landmarks disappeared. "This compass has been in my family for 40 years, she told them, letting each boy hold it. "My father used it to map new territories. He always said a good compass points to more than just north. It points to truth. You can lose your way in a lot of ways in life, but if you keep your moral compass true, you'll always find your way home eventually." Henry held it carefully, reading the inscription on the back, "True north always guides home." "That's what we're doing," he said quietly. "Going home?" "To Thornhill Manor, to our real lives." "Yes," Ada agreed. "But first we have to survive the journey." Over those 3 days, Ruth proved invaluable. She had connections in town, people she trusted. Through them, she gathered information about Vernon's search patterns, about where his men were concentrated, about the safest routes out of the area. "The main road to Helena is being watched," she reported on the second day. They've got men posted at the stagecoach station, the train depot, and the main pass. They're checking everyone traveling north. Then we don't go north, Ada said, studying the rough map she'd drawn. We go west first, then circle around. It'll add days to the journey, but it might keep us alive. West takes you through rough country, Ruth warned, especially with winter coming. I know that country, Ada said. I've trapped and hunted through most of it. It's hard, but we can do it. Sam had been listening intently. What about supplies? We can't carry enough food and water for a week-long journey. We'll cache supplies along the route, Ada explained. Ruth and I will take a wagon out tomorrow, supposedly going to visit her sister. We'll hide food and blankets at 3 different points along the way. When we travel, we'll know exactly where to find what we need. It was a good plan, simple, but that was its strength. Complex plans had too many points of failure that afternoon. While Ruth went to make arrangements for the wagon, Ada sat with the boys and had the conversation she'd been dreading. I need you to understand something, she said seriously. This journey to Helena, it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. Harder than running from your uncle, harder than those weeks in the wilderness. We'll be cold, hungry, and constantly at risk. And I can't guarantee we'll all make it. The boys were silent, the weight of her words settling over them. If something happens to me, Ada continued, Henry, you're in charge. You use the compass to keep heading west, then north. You avoid people, you stay hidden, and you get your brothers to Helena no matter what. The address for Judge Abernathy is written down. It's in the packet with the will. You find him, you give him everything, and you tell him what happened. Nothing's going to happen to you, Owen said, but his voice trembled. Probably not, Ada agreed. But we plan for the worst and hope for the best. That's how you survive. She pulled out her rifle, the one Henry had been practicing with. Henry, this is yours now. You've learned to use it. I'll carry a pistol Ruth is lending me. If we run into trouble, if Vernon's men find us, you might have to use this. Do you understand? Henry took the rifle, his hand steadied despite the fear in his eyes. I understand. Sam, Ada turned to the middle boy, you're the scout. You're quick, you're quiet, and you notice things others miss. Your job is to stay alert, watch for danger, and warn us before trouble arrives. Can you do that? Sam nodded. I can do that. Oh, and you're the keeper of the evidence. That satchel stays with you every second. If we have to run and split up, you hold on to it no matter what. Everything we're doing is to get that evidence to the judge. Without it, Vernon wins. Understand? Owen clutched the satchel tighter. I won't let it go. I promise. Ada looked at all 3 of them, these boys who'd become so much more than just her responsibility. They'd become her purpose, her family, her reason for living. I need you to know something else, she said, her voice softer now. I lost my daughter 7 years ago. Lost her because I couldn't save her from fever and fate. For 7 years I've been carrying that guilt, that failure. But you 3, you've given me a chance to do something right. To protect someone, to fight for someone, to matter again. She paused, making sure they heard the next words clearly. I will get you to Helena. I will get you to safety, and I will make sure your uncle pays for what he did. That's my promise to you and to your parents' memory. Whatever it takes. Henry stood, walked to her, and hugged her fiercely. Sam and Owen joined in, and for a long moment they stood together in the attic, bound by shared loss and shared determination. The next day, Ada and Ruth made their supply run. They took Ruth's wagon and 2 horses, publicly announcing they were going to visit Ruth's sister, who lived west of town. They made sure to mention it to several people, establishing a legitimate reason for the journey. They traveled west for 3 hours, finding the spots Ada had identified on her mental map of the region. At each location, they buried supplies in waterproof oilcloth, dried meat, hard biscuits, matches, blankets. They marked each cache with subtle signs that only someone who knew what to look for would notice. A stack of 3 rocks in a specific pattern, a notch carved in a tree trunk, a pile of pine cones arranged just so. You're good at this, Ruth observed, as Ada finished marking the 3rd cache. 7 years of surviving alone teaches you to be careful, Ada replied. And I've learned that preparation is the difference between living and dying in the mountains. On the way back to town, they saw riders in the distance, 4 men on horseback, clearly searching the area. Ada and Ruth continued their casual pace, just 2 women on an ordinary errand. The men paid them no attention, but Ada's heart raced. The searchers were spreading out, covering more ground. Time was running out. That evening, back in the attic, Ada reviewed the plan one final time with the boys. They would leave tomorrow night, moving in darkness to avoid detection. They'd head west initially, following a route that would take them through the roughest terrain that searchers on horseback would have difficulty navigating. We move at night. Rest during the day, she explained. It's slower but safer. We'll reach the first cache on the 2nd night, the 2nd cache on the 4th night, and the 3rd on the 6th. From there, it's a straight push north to Helena. 2 more days if we push hard. 8 days total, Henry calculated. What if the weather turns? Then it takes longer, Ada said honestly. But we don't have a choice. Every day we wait here is another day Vernon's men get closer to finding us. She pulled out the compass again, let each boy practice taking bearings in the dim candlelight. They needed to be able to do this in the dark, by touch, when visibility was nearly 0. Owen had been quiet most of the day. Now he spoke up, his voice small. "Miss Ada, I'm scared." Ada knelt beside him. "I'm scared too, Owen. Only a fool wouldn't be. But being scared doesn't mean we don't go. It means we're smart enough to understand the danger. Your father was scared when he wrote that will, but he did it anyway because he loved you boys. Your mother was scared when the fire started, but I bet she fought to save you until her last breath. Courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." Owen nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden horse, a toy, well worn from handling. "Papa made this for me when I was little. I've carried it everywhere since they died. It reminds me that he loved me." Ada felt tears prick her eyes. "He did love you, all of you, and he's watching over you now, proud of how brave you're being." That night, their last night in Ruth's attic, Ada barely slept. She reviewed the plan obsessively, looking for flaws, for overlooked dangers. She checked their supplies 3 times. She cleaned the rifle and the pistol, made sure they had adequate ammunition. The boys slept fitfully, their rest broken by nightmares and anxiety. Ada heard Owen cry out once, heard Henry's gentle voice soothing him back to sleep. Around midnight, Ruth came up with tea and sat with Ada in the darkness. "You're doing something brave," Ruth said quietly. "Something right, or something incredibly stupid that'll get us all killed," Ada countered. "Maybe both." Ruth smiled. "But I've known you since you first came to this town as a young bride. You've always had a strong sense of right and wrong. After Rose died, after Thomas left, I thought that part of you had died too. I'm glad to see I was wrong. I'm not the same person I was," Ada said. "No, you're stronger. Harder maybe, but stronger." Ruth squeezed her hand. "Those boys are lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have them," Ada replied. "They gave me a reason to stop just surviving and start living again." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Ruth spoke again. "If something goes wrong, if Vernon's men come here after you leave, I'll tell them nothing. I swear it, I know you will. But Ruth, if they threaten you, I'm an old woman who's buried 3 husbands. You think I'm afraid of threats?" Ruth's voice was fierce. "You get those boys to safety. That's all that matters." As dawn approached, Ada finally dozed, falling into an uneasy sleep filled with dreams of mountains and pursuit, of snow and blood, of 3 boys, depending on her to save them. She woke to find Owen standing beside her pallet, his satchel clutched tight. "Is it time?" he asked. Ada checked the window. Evening was falling. "Almost. Wake your brothers. We leave as soon as it's full dark." The next hours passed in a blur of final preparations. They dressed in layers, warm clothes beneath oilcloth coats. They packed their supplies carefully, distributing weight evenly. They went over the plan one last time, making sure everyone knew their role. Ruth made them a final hot meal, stew and bread, food to fortify them for the hard journey ahead. As they ate, she pressed a small bag into Ada's hand. "Money," she said quietly. "Not much, but it might help if you need to bribe someone or buy supplies." "Ruth, I can't." Yes, you can. And you will. Consider it an investment in justice. Ruth's eyes were wet. You come back safe, you hear me? All of you. We will, Ada promised, though she couldn't be certain it was true. As full darkness fell, they gathered by the back door. Ada did a final check, compass in her pocket, pistol loaded, supplies secure. The boys had their packs, their determination evident in their faces despite their fear. Ready? Ada asked. 3 nods, then let's go. Stay close, stay quiet, and remember, we're stronger together than apart. They slipped out into the night, 4 shadows moving through the darkened town. Ada led them through alleys and between buildings, avoiding the main street, where a few late-night drinkers might still be about. They reached the edge of town without incident. Before them stretched the wilderness, dark, cold, and full of danger. Ada pulled out the compass, oriented herself westward. Behind her, she felt the boys gather close, drawing courage from her presence. "This is it," she said softly. "From here on out, we're committed. No turning back. We're ready," Henry said. And his brothers echoed the sentiment. Ada took a deep breath, checked the compass one more time, and stepped forward into the darkness. The journey to Helena had begun. Behind them, in the mountains they were leaving, 8 men continued their search. Ahead of them, 90 miles of rough country and uncertain fate. And in Helena, a judge who might be their salvation or their doom. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. They had hope. They had the truth in a leather satchel, and they had Ada McCrae, who'd spent 7 years learning to survive the impossible. It would have to be enough. The wilderness swallowed them, and they disappeared into the night, 4 souls bound together by love and determination, heading toward whatever destiny awaited them. True north, the compass said, true north, toward home and justice and the chance to finally make things right. The first 2 nights passed without incident. They traveled through darkness, using the compass and Ada's knowledge of the terrain to navigate. By day, they sheltered in caves or beneath rock overhangs, sleeping in shifts with one person always on watch. The boys adapted to the rhythm surprisingly well. The weeks of training served them now. They moved quietly, conserved their energy, and complained rarely despite the cold and exhaustion. On the 3rd day, they reached the first supply cache. Ada dug up the oilcloth bundle, and they ate the first decent meal they'd had since leaving Ruth's attic. The food restored their strength and their spirits. "We're doing it," Sam said, a hint of pride in his voice. "We're actually making it." "We're a third of the way there," Ada corrected gently. "Don't get overconfident. That's when mistakes happen." But privately, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they would make it. Maybe they'd reach Helena, find Judge Abernathy, and finally bring Vernon to justice. The 4th night changed everything. They'd been traveling for about 3 hours, moving through a narrow canyon Ada remembered from her hunting days. The walls rose steeply on either side, creating a natural corridor that would save them miles of difficult climbing. Ada was in the lead, using the compass to maintain their bearing. Sam was second, then Owen, with Henry bringing up the rear with the rifle. That's when Sam hissed a warning. Ada froze. Sam pointed ahead where the canyon narrowed even further. There, barely visible in the starlight, was a rope stretched across their path at chest height. A tripwire. Ada's blood went cold. This wasn't a natural obstacle. Someone had set this deliberately. She signaled the boys to stop, to stay absolutely still. Then she carefully examined the rope without touching it. It led to both canyon walls, attached to something in the shadows. A trap. But what kind? She followed one end of the rope with her eyes and saw it. A pile of loose rocks balanced precariously on a narrow ledge, about 20 feet up the canyon wall. The rope was the trigger. Touch it, and the rocks would come crashing down. They'd walked into an ambush. "Back," Ada whispered, slowly, carefully. "Back the way we came." But as they started to retreat, they heard it. The sound of horses behind them, voices, men approaching their position. They were boxed in. "Trap ahead, pursuers behind." Ada's mind raced. The canyon walls were too steep to climb quickly, especially in the dark. They couldn't go forward without triggering the rockfall. And they couldn't go back without running straight into Vernon's men. She looked up at the canyon walls again, assessing. There, about 30 feet ahead, just before the tripwire, was a narrow crack in the rock face. It looked wide enough for a person to squeeze into, maybe deep enough to hide in. It was their only chance. "See that crack?" she whispered to the boys. "We're going to edge past this rope very carefully, get to that crack and hide. Don't touch the rope. Don't make a sound." The voices behind them were getting closer. Maybe 2 minutes away, maybe less. Ada went first, moving with agonizing slowness. She ducked under the tripwire, careful not to let her pack brush against it. One foot then the other, breathing shallowly. Every muscle tense. She made it. Owen went next, and Ada's heart nearly stopped when his satchel swung too close to the rope. But he caught it just in time, pulled it tight against his body, and slipped under. Sam followed, smooth and quick despite the danger. Then it was Henry's turn. He was larger than the others, and he had the rifle slung across his back. The rifle caught on something, a rock, a root, and as Henry tried to free it, he stumbled. His hand shot out for balance and brushed the tripwire. The rope sang with tension. Above them, the pile of rocks shifted. "Run!" Ada shouted, abandoning stealth. "To the crack now!" They sprinted the 30 feet to the crevice in the rock face as behind them the rockfall began. Ada shoved Owen into the crack first, then Sam. Henry was right behind her as she dove into the narrow space. Rocks crashed down where they'd been standing seconds before, filling the canyon with dust and noise. The roar was deafening, echoing off the canyon walls. When the dust settled, the canyon floor was completely blocked by fallen rock. The trap had been sprung. And on the other side of that pile of rock, Ada could hear men shouting. "Did we get them?" "I don't know." "Check the other side." More voices now, and the sound of men scrambling over the rubble. Ada and the boys pressed deeper into the crack. It was tighter than Ada had hoped. She could barely squeeze through sideways. But it did go deeper into the rock, and as they worked their way in, it opened into a small natural chamber. They huddled there in absolute darkness and silence as, outside, Vernon's men searched. "I see tracks." "They came this way." "Well, where'd they go? They couldn't have just vanished." Ada held Owen close, her hand over his mouth to muffle his frightened breathing. Sam was pressed against her other side, trembling. Henry was wedged in behind them, the rifle somehow still on his back. The searchers were right outside their hiding place. If someone thought to check the crack, if they brought torches, they'd be found for certain. Spread out. "Check every hole, every shadow." Footsteps. The scrape of boots on rock. A man's voice, very close now. "What about this crack here?" Ada's hand moved to the pistol at her belt. If they were discovered, she'd have to fight. 3 bullets in the pistol, maybe 5 in Henry's rifle, if he could bring it to bear in this tight space. Against how many men? 4? 6? More? They'd never survive a gunfight. Too narrow, another voice said. Nobody could fit through that. Better check anyway. Garrett said to be thorough. Ada heard someone approach the crack. A hand appeared holding a torch. Light flickered into their hiding place. Owen whimpered despite Ada's hand. The sound was tiny, barely audible, but in the absolute silence of their terror, it seemed loud as a gunshot. The torch paused. What was that? Ada's hand tightened on the pistol. This was it. They were going to be found, and she'd have to fight. And probably they'd all die right here in this dark crack in a mountain canyon. Then, from somewhere in the distance came a sound, the cry of a mountain lion. Long, eerie, echoing through the canyon. The man with the torch jerked back. "Did you hear that?" "Lion, we need to get back to the horses. But what about lions hunt at night and we're on foot in a narrow canyon? You want to end up as cat food? We've checked this area." "They're not here. Must have doubled back before the trap." Ada heard them retreat, heard them calling to each other as they reorganized. Within 10 minutes the sounds faded as the search party moved away down the canyon. But Ada didn't move, didn't let the boys move. They stayed frozen in their hiding place for what felt like hours, waiting, making absolutely certain the men were truly gone. Finally, when her legs were cramping and Owen was crying silently from fear and exhaustion, Ada whispered, "Stay here. I'm going to check." She squeezed through the crack, emerged into the canyon. The moon had risen now, providing enough light to see. The rockfall had completely blocked the canyon in one direction. She could hear nothing, see no movement. They were alone. She went back for the boys, helped them out of the crack one by one. They stood together in the moonlight, shaking with reaction and relief. "That mountain lion," Henry said. "That was lucky." "That wasn't a mountain lion," Ada said quietly. "Mountain lions don't sound like that." "That was someone imitating a mountain lion. Someone who knew we were in danger and created a distraction." "Who?" Sam asked. Ada looked back the way they'd come, toward the distant town where Ruth waited. "Someone who's watching out for us." She didn't know how Ruth had managed it, whether she'd followed them or had someone else tracking their progress. But somehow she'd been there when they needed her most. "Come on," Ada said. "We need to keep moving." "They'll be back at dawn to search more thoroughly." They climbed over the rockfall. It took time and effort, and more than once someone slipped and nearly fell. But eventually they made it through and continued west, moving faster now, despite their exhaustion. The trap had been sophisticated, well placed. Someone had predicted their route, had planned carefully to catch them. That someone was probably Garrett, the ex-Pinkerton man with his methodical approach to hunting. They were dealing with a professional tracker now, not just hired thugs. That made everything more dangerous. As dawn approached, they found shelter in a thick stand of pines. Ada risked a small, hidden fire to warm them and dry Owen's boots, which had gotten soaked in a stream crossing. The boys fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by terror and exertion. Ada stayed awake, keeping watch, her mind working through what had happened. The trap meant their route was compromised. Vernon's men had predicted their direction and were setting ambushes. Did that mean the other supply caches were compromised too? Should they change course entirely? But changing course meant adding days to their journey, using supplies they didn't have. They were committed now, for better or worse. Ada pulled out the compass, studied it in the growing daylight. "True north always guides home," the inscription read. But what if the path home was blocked? What if every direction led to danger? She thought about Ruth's distraction, about the risk her friend had taken. She thought about these 3 boys who trusted her to keep them safe. She thought about Vernon, comfortable somewhere, probably thinking he'd won, that the children would never make it to Helena. "We'll make it," Ada whispered to the compass, to the morning to herself. "Whatever it takes. We'll make it." The sun rose over the mountains, beginning a new day. 6 more days to Helena. 6 more days of danger and hardship. 6 more days to survive before they could find safety and justice. But they'd survived last night. They'd escaped a trap that should have caught them. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive the rest of the journey too. Ada checked the compass one more time, confirmed their bearing, and allowed herself to rest for a few hours. They'd need all their strength for what was coming behind them. Vernon's men regrouped and planned their next ambush. Ahead of them, the journey continued through wilderness and danger, and in a leather satchel, clutched tight in a sleeping boy's arms, the truth waited to be delivered. They reached the second supply cache on the 5th night, but found it had been discovered. The oilcloth was torn open, the food scattered and ruined, the blankets slashed. A clear message. Vernon's men knew about their caches and were 1 step ahead. Ada's heart sank, but she showed nothing to the boys. "We move on. We still have what we're carrying," but privately she knew they were in serious trouble. They had maybe 2 days of food left, and they still had 4 days of travel ahead of them, more if the weather turned. As if to punctuate her concerns, the wind picked up that night, carrying the smell of snow. The temperature dropped sharply. The storm hit on the 6th day. They'd taken shelter in a shallow cave, but it provided little protection from the wind-driven snow that began falling in the early afternoon. Within hours, visibility was reduced to a few yards. The temperature plummeted. Ada built up the fire as much as she dared, but they were running low on dry wood. The boys huddled close, shivering despite their layers of clothing. "How long will this last?" Henry asked, his teeth chattering. "Could be hours, could be days," Ada answered honestly. "Mountain storms are unpredictable." Owen was particularly suffering. His smaller body had less resistance to the cold, and despite Ada wrapping him in both her coat and his own blanket, he couldn't stop shaking. By nightfall, he was feverish. Ada pressed her hand to his forehead and felt the heat radiating from him. Her stomach clenched with fear, not the fear of being caught, but the deeper, more primal fear of watching a child sicken. "He needs medicine," Sam said. Stating the obvious, "I know." Ada went through her pack, found the small bundle of herbs she always carried. She had willow bark for fever, but not much. She made a tea with their precious remaining water, forced Owen to drink it despite his protests. "It tastes bad," he whimpered. "I know, sweetheart. But it'll help." Ada held him close, sharing her body heat. "Just rest now. Let the medicine work." The night was long and terrible. The storm howled outside, rattling through the trees, driving snow into every crevice. The fire burned low as their fuel ran out. Owen's fever climbed higher. Ada had been here before, watching a child burn with fever, feeling helpless, knowing that words and wishes couldn't heal what was wrong. The memories of Rose's last days came flooding back, and she had to fight down panic. "I can't lose him," she whispered to Henry when Owen finally fell into a restless sleep. "Not after everything. I can't watch another child die." "He's not going to die," Henry said with a certainty he probably didn't feel. "We won't let him." But as the night wore on and Owen's fever didn't break, Ada began making desperate calculations. They were maybe 30 miles from Helena now, 2 days of hard travel in good conditions. But with a sick child in a snowstorm with no supplies? Impossible, unless she left the boys here and went for help herself. She could move faster alone, could reach Helena in a day if she pushed hard, could bring back a doctor, medicine, proper help. But that meant leaving 3 children alone in a cave in the wilderness, with Vernon's men still searching. It meant trusting that they'd be safe, that Owen wouldn't worsen, that nothing would go wrong. She was weighing this terrible choice when dawn came, grey and cold, but clear. The storm had passed, and Owen's fever had broken. Ada felt his forehead and nearly cried with relief. Still warm, but no longer burning. He was sleeping peacefully now, his breathing steady. "Thank God," she breathed. They rested that day, letting Owen recover, building up their strength. Ada rationed what food remained. They were down to the last of their supplies, but if they were careful, they could make it stretch for 2 more days. That evening, as they prepared to resume their journey, Henry came to Ada with a troubled expression. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what we're doing, about the risk you're taking for us." "Henry, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "If something happens, if we get caught, you should tell them we forced you, that we threatened you, made you help us. You could say we had a weapon, that you were scared. They might believe it." Ada stared at him. "You want me to betray you to save myself?" "I want you to survive," Henry said simply. "You've done so much for us. You shouldn't die for our fight." Ada pulled him into a fierce hug. "Listen to me. I chose this. Every step of the way I chose to help you. Not because you forced me, but because it's right. Because you boys deserve justice and safety and the chance to grow up. And I'm not going to abandon you now, no matter what happens." She pulled back, looked him in the eyes. "We're family now. That's what family does. They stick together even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Your father knew that. He died protecting you. I'm not going to dishonor his memory by running away when things get difficult." Henry nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you," he whispered. They set out that night, moving north now, heading straight for Helena. Owen was weak but determined, and his brothers helped him over the rough patches. The sky was clear, the stars brilliant, and Ada used the compass to guide them true. On the 8th day, they saw it in the distance, the lights of Helena, golden against the darkness. They'd made it, but as they drew closer, Ada's caution kicked in. They couldn't just walk into town. Vernon would have men there watching for them. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the city, and Ada studied it through her spyglass. The town was much larger than the one they'd left, with proper streets and substantial buildings. Somewhere down there was Judge Abernathy. Somewhere was the bank with Jonathan's evidence. Somewhere, probably, were Vernon's men waiting to stop them. "We need to be smart about this," Ada said. "We've come too far to make a stupid mistake now. How do we find the judge?" Sam asked. "The courthouse. It'll be one of the larger buildings. probably near the center of town. We go at dawn, when the streets are busy with people starting their day. We blend in with the crowds, we move quickly, and we get to the judge before anyone realizes we're there. And if Vernon's men spot us? Henry asked. Ada pulled out the pistol, checked that it was loaded. Then we run, and if we can't run, we fight. They spent the remaining hours of darkness resting on the ridge, gathering their strength for the final push. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Ada gathered them close. "This is it," she said. "Everything we've done, everything we've survived, it all comes down to the next few hours. Stay together, stay alert, and remember, that satchel gets to the judge no matter what. If something happens to me, you boys keep going. Understand?" They nodded, their faces set with determination. "All right then." Ada stood, helped Owen to his feet. "Let's finish this." They descended toward Helena as the sun rose. 4 travelers who'd crossed impossible miles through danger and hardship, carrying truth and hope in a worn leather satchel. Behind them, the wilderness they'd conquered. Ahead, the final confrontation with the man who'd murdered their parents and hunted them across the mountains. Vernon Thornhill didn't know it yet, but his victims were coming for him, and Ada McCrae, who'd learned to survive against impossible odds, was going to make sure they succeeded. The courthouse loomed in the distance, and with it the possibility of justice. They were so close now, so terribly, desperately close. But as they reached the outskirts of town and began moving through the early morning streets, Ada saw something that made her blood run cold. Standing outside the courthouse, scanning the street with cold, calculating eyes, was a tall man in a well-tailored coat. Garrett, Vernon's hunter, had beaten them to Helena and was waiting at the very place they needed to reach. Ada's hand moved to her pistol. Beside her, Henry shifted the rifle slightly, ready but trying to appear casual. "He doesn't know what we look like," Sam whispered. "We could walk right past him." "Maybe," Ada said. But she knew professional trackers like Garrett didn't work on recognition alone. They looked for patterns, for behaviors, for anything out of place. 4 travelers, exhausted and trail-worn, making a beeline for the courthouse. That would catch his attention immediately. "New plan," Ada said quietly. "We split up. Sam, you take Owen and circle around to the back of the courthouse. Find a side entrance, a servant's door, anything. Henry and I will create a distraction at the front. Give us 5 minutes, then get inside and find Judge Abernathy." "What kind of distraction?" Henry asked. Ada smiled grimly. "The kind that gets Garrett's full attention." "Come on!" She led Henry directly toward the courthouse, walking with purpose, making no attempt to hide. Sure enough, Garrett's eyes locked onto them immediately. He started toward them, his hand moving to his coat where a weapon probably rested. Ada waited until he was 20 feet away, then shouted at the top of her lungs, "Help! This man is trying to kidnap us. Someone help!" The street, already filling with morning workers, erupted in confusion. People turned, stared. Garrett froze, suddenly the center of attention. "That's not... He sputtered, caught off guard by the brazen accusation. Ada grabbed Henry's hand and ran, not toward the courthouse, but away from it, drawing Garrett after them. She heard him curse, heard him shouting for someone to stop them. They ducked down an alley, Ada's heart pounding. Behind them, Garrett gave chase, along with at least 2 other men, his accomplices. Probably this way," Ada gasped, pulling Henry through a maze of back streets she'd memorized from studying the town through her spyglass. They couldn't keep this up for long. She was exhausted, and Henry was struggling with the rifle, but they didn't need long. Just 5 minutes, just long enough for Sam and Owen to get inside, to find the judge, to deliver the evidence. They burst out of the alley onto a main street. A freight wagon was passing, and Ada made a split-second decision. She pulled Henry up onto the back of the moving wagon, clinging to the tailgate. The driver shouted in surprise, but they were already moving away down the street. Garrett emerged from the alley seconds too late, watching in frustration as his quarry escaped. Ada and Henry jumped off the wagon 2 blocks later, diving into a crowded market. They moved through the press of people, using the crowd as cover. Did we give them enough time? Henry panted. "I hope so," Ada said. "I really hope so." They made their way back toward the courthouse by a circuitous route, staying alert for Garrett and his men. When they finally reached the building and slipped in through a side door, Ada's legs were shaking with exhaustion. Inside, the courthouse was quiet, official, intimidating. Ada and Henry stood in the marble foyer, unsure where to go, when they heard a familiar voice. "Ada!" "Henry!" Sam appeared at the top of a grand staircase, waving frantically.
Up here, we found him.
They climbed the stairs and followed Sam down a hallway to a door marked Judge Marcus Abernathy Chambers. Inside was a spacious office lined with law books. And there, sitting at a large desk, was an older man with white hair and keen eyes. Beside him stood Owen, still clutching his satchel, tears streaming down his face. "Mrs. McCrae," the judge said, standing. "I'm Marcus Abernathy. I believe these young men have quite a story to tell me." Ada looked at Judge Abernathy, and recognition flooded through her. This was the man who'd ruled against her in her custody case 7 years ago, who'd sided with Thomas when he'd claimed she was unfit to be a mother after Rose's death. The man whose judgment had been the final blow that sent her fleeing to the mountains, and now she was trusting him with these boys' lives. The judge's eyes widened as he recognized her in return. "Mrs. McCrae, I never expected to see you again." "Neither did I," Ada said quietly. She straightened her shoulders, pushed down the old resentment. "This wasn't about her. These boys need your help, Your Honor. They need justice. So I'm beginning to understand." He gestured to chairs. "Please sit, all of you. You look like you've been through hell." They collapsed into the chairs gratefully. Owen kept the satchel in his lap, but his small hands were already working to open it. "Start from the beginning," Judge Abernathy said gently. "Take your time." Henry spoke first, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. He told about his parents' death in the fire, about going to live with Uncle Vernon, about the conversation Owen had overheard. He explained their desperate flight, the weeks in the wilderness, finding Ada. Then Ada took over, describing Vernon's hired men, the systematic search, the traps they'd narrowly escaped. She explained about the newspaper clipping, about the evidence they'd found, and then Owen discovered something, she said, nodding to the youngest boy. Owen pulled out the hidden will, unfolding it carefully. "Papa sewed it into my bag. I didn't know it was there until Miss Ruth helped us find it." Judge Abernathy took the document, his expression growing more serious with every line he read. When he finished, he set it down carefully, removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "Jonathan came to see me," he said quietly. "About 3 months before he died. He asked me questions about estate law, about guardianship, about what would happen to his boys if something happened to him and his wife. I didn't think much of it at the time, thought he was just being a responsible father." He put his spectacles back on, met Henry's eyes. "Now I understand. He was preparing for the worst, and he trusted me to protect you if that worst came to pass. Will you?" Henry asked. "Will you protect us? Will you help us stop Uncle Vernon?" The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, moved to his window, looked out at the town below. 7 years ago," he said, "I made a decision in this courthouse that I've regretted ever since. A woman stood before me, broken by grief, accused by her husband of being an unfit mother because she'd failed to save their dying child from fever. And I, in my wisdom, sided with the husband, gave him what little custody mattered when there was no child left to raise. Sent that woman away with nothing but guilt and judgment." Ada's throat tightened. She hadn't expected this. "I was wrong," Judge Abernathy continued, turning to face her. "I know that now. I knew it within a month, but by then you were gone, and I had no way to tell you. You were a grieving mother who'd lost everything, and I added to your pain with my ruling." He moved to stand in front of her chair. "Mrs. McCrae, I can't undo the past, but I can make better choices now. And I can tell you that those boys are lucky to have you. Jonathan was right to trust me, and I won't betray that trust." Ada felt tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. The judge returned to his desk, pulled out official paper. "First things first. Based on this codicil, I'm issuing an emergency order placing you boys in my temporary custody. Second, I'm sending a telegram immediately to the federal marshal. Murder and fraud on this scale require more authority than I have locally." He began writing quickly, his pen scratching across the paper. "Third, we're going to that bank and opening that safety deposit box. Whatever evidence Jonathan left us, we need it now." "But Vernon's men," Sam interjected. "They're out there. The man named Garrett, he's watching—" "Let me worry about that," the judge said. He rang a bell on his desk, and a clerk appeared. "Send for Sheriff Dalton immediately, and have someone fetch Dr. Morrison. These children need medical attention." He turned back to them. "You're under my protection now. Vernon Thornhill's hired thugs have no authority here. If they try anything in my town, they'll answer to the law." The next hours passed in a blur. The sheriff arrived with 4 deputies. A doctor examined the boys, treating Owen's lingering fever, bandaging cuts and scrapes, declaring them malnourished but fundamentally sound. Food appeared, real food, hot and plentiful. Ada and the boys ate until they couldn't eat anymore. Then, with an escort of deputies, they made their way to Helena National Bank. The bank manager, a nervous man named Thompson, unlocked the safety deposit box with the key Owen had carried so carefully. Inside was a thick folder of documents. Judge Abernathy read through them methodically, his expression growing darker. "Dear Lord, Jonathan documented everything. Bank transfers, altered ledgers, forged signatures. Vernon has been embezzling from the family business for 8 years. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is it enough?" Henry asked. "To convict him? It's enough to hang him," the judge said bluntly. "Between the evidence of embezzlement and your testimony about what Owen overheard, the plot to kill you 3, Vernon Thornhill is finished." He looked at the bank manager. "These documents are now evidence in a federal murder investigation." "They don't leave my sight," Thompson nodded nervously. "Of course, Your Honor. Whatever you need." They returned to the courthouse, where the judge's chambers had become a command center. The federal marshal had already responded to the telegram. He was en route from Denver and would arrive within 2 days. "What about Vernon?" Ada asked. "He's still out there. Still dangerous. I've sent word to the U.S. Marshal's office in 3 territories," Judge Abernathy said. "Vernon Thornhill is wanted for murder and fraud. If he tries to run, he won't get far. And if he tries to come here," he gestured to the deputies stationed outside his door, "he'll find himself in custody very quickly." That night, they stayed in the judge's own home. A large, comfortable house with a housekeeper who fussed over the boys and prepared proper beds for them. Ada found herself in a guest room, staring at clean sheets and a soft mattress, almost unable to believe they'd made it. A knock on her door. Judge Abernathy stood in the hallway. "May I speak with you?" Ada nodded, gestured him in. He closed the door, stood awkwardly for a moment. "I need to say this properly," he began. "What I did 7 years ago, ruling against you in that custody matter, it was wrong. I was influenced by your husband's standing in the community, by the conventional wisdom that a mother who'd let her child die must be somehow deficient. I didn't see your grief. I didn't see that you were a victim of circumstance and tragedy, not negligence." Ada sat on the edge of the bed. "I blame myself too. Still do, some days. You shouldn't. Fever kills children despite the best care, the most vigilant parents. You did nothing wrong." He paused. "And what you've done for these boys, the courage it took, the sacrifice, it speaks to who you really are. You're a remarkable woman, Ada McCrae. I'm sorry it took me 7 years to see it." "Thank you," Ada said. That means more than you know. There's a legal matter we should discuss," the judge continued. "The codicil names me as guardian, but that was Jonathan's emergency measure. The boys will need a permanent guardian, someone to manage the estate until Henry comes of age, someone to raise them and care for them." He met her eyes. "I'd like to petition the court, meaning myself in this case, to name you as their permanent guardian, with a proper salary from the estate, of course, and legal authority to act in their interests. Would you be willing?" Ada's heart swelled. "You'd trust me with that? After watching you cross 90 miles of wilderness, hunted by killers, to save these children. After seeing how much they love and trust you. Ada, you're exactly who those boys need. Their father would approve, I think. And I can make it legal and proper. Yes, Ada said, tears streaming down her face again. Yes, I'll be their guardian. I'll take care of them. I'll give them the home and family they deserve. The judge smiled. Good. I'll draw up the papers tomorrow. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. The federal marshal arrived and took custody of all the evidence. Vernon Thornhill was arrested in his hotel room in a neighboring town. He'd been staying close, directing the search efforts. When confronted with the evidence, he'd tried to bargain, then to threaten. Then finally he'd simply refused to speak. It didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. The story spread through Helena and beyond. Newspapers picked it up. 3 orphans escape murderous uncle. Mountain woman saves Thornhill heirs. $10 million fortune secured for rightful owners. But Ada ignored the attention. She was focused on the boys. They stayed in Helena for 3 weeks while the legal matters were resolved. Judge Abernathy worked tirelessly, cutting through bureaucracy and red tape. The guardianship papers were signed and sealed. The estate was audited and secured. Vernon's accomplices, including Garrett, were arrested and charged. And then, one crisp November morning, Judge Abernathy made an announcement. "It's time for you to go home," he said. "All of you. Thornhill Manor has been secured and prepared for your arrival. The staff has been hired, people I've personally vetted. You're free to return to your lives." The boys looked at each other, then at Ada. "All of us?" Owen asked. "Ada too. Ada especially," the judge confirmed. "She's your legal guardian now. Where you go, she goes." They traveled to Thornhill Manor by coach, a journey of several days. As they approached the estate, Ada felt the boys' excitement and nervousness growing. The manor was impressive, a large house set on extensive grounds, with forests and fields stretching in every direction. It had been closed up since the fire that killed the boys' parents, but now smoke rose from the chimneys and lights glowed in the windows. Henry clutched his father's pocket watch as they pulled up to the front door. Sam held tight to Ada's hand. Owen had his satchel. Though the precious documents were safely filed in Judge Abernathy's office now, they walked into the manor together. The staff lined up to greet them, a housekeeper, a cook, groundskeepers, people who would help make this house a home again. Ada looked around at the elegant rooms, the fine furniture, the evidence of wealth and privilege. This was so far from her mountain cabin, from the simple life she'd lived for 7 years. But as she looked at the 3 boys, her boys now, legally and in her heart, she knew she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That evening, after dinner, and after the boys had been tucked into beds in their old rooms, Ada stood in the library. The painting of the ship was still there, just as Owen had drawn it. Behind it, she knew, was the safe. She walked through the manor slowly, learning its contours, beginning to understand it as home. When she reached the master bedroom, her bedroom now, though that felt strange, she found something on the dresser. A letter, in Judge Abernathy's handwriting. "Mrs. McCrae," it read. "In Jonathan's papers, I found a letter addressed to his son's guardian. Since that guardian is now you, I thought you should have it. With respect and admiration, Marcus Abernathy." Ada unfolded the enclosed letter with trembling hands. "To whoever reads this," Jonathan Thornhill had written. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my worst fears have come true. My sons are orphaned and in danger. I'm trusting you, whoever you are, to protect them, to raise them with love and integrity, to teach them that money matters less than character, that family is more than blood, and that doing the right thing is worth any sacrifice. Help them become the men they're meant to be. Help them honor their mother's memory and mine. And know that wherever I am, I'm grateful beyond words for what you're doing. Thank you for saving my boys. Signed, Jonathan Thornhill." Ada sat on the bed, the letter clutched to her chest, and cried. Cried for Jonathan and Elizabeth, who'd loved their sons so fiercely. Cried for Rose, who she'd never stopped loving. Cried for the 7 years of isolation and grief. And cried in relief and joy that she'd found purpose again, found family, found a reason to live fully instead of just survive. She heard a small sound and looked up. Owen stood in the doorway, his wooden horse clutched in one hand. "I couldn't sleep," he said. This house is too big and quiet. Ada patted the bed beside her. Come here. Owen climbed up, settled against her side. Are you sad? A little, Ada admitted. But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful I found you three. Grateful I got to help you. Grateful we're all here together. Will you stay? Owen asked. Even though Uncle Vernon is caught and we're safe now. Will you stay and be our mother? Ada's heart broke and healed at the same time. I'll stay. For as long as you boys want me, I'll stay. Owen hugged her fiercely. Forever then. We want you forever. Sam and Henry appeared in the doorway, having heard the conversation. They joined their brother on the bed, and the four of them sat together in the lamplight, a family forged by tragedy and survival, by choice and love. Tomorrow, Henry said, I want to show you the grounds, the places Papa used to take us, the creek where we caught fish, the tree we used to climb. I want to show you the kitchen, Sam added. Cook used to let me help make cookies. I want to draw everything, Owen said, so we never forget. We'll do all of that, Ada promised. We'll make this house a home again. We'll remember your parents, honor their memory, and build new memories of our own. She pulled her locket from her pocket, the one with Rose's picture. She opened it, showed the boys. This is my daughter, Rose. She would have been about your age, Owen. She died a long time ago, and I thought I'd never be a mother again, that I'd never have a family. You have us now, Henry said firmly. Yes, Ada agreed, smiling through her tears. Yes, I do. In the spring, they planted a garden together, roses for the boy's mother, forget-me-nots for their father, and a small section of mountain wildflowers that Ada transplanted from the high country. A reminder of where their journey had begun. They kept the mountain cabin, too. Once a year, they traveled there, spending a few weeks in the wilderness, remembering the time when it had been their refuge. Ada taught the boys more about survival in the mountains, and they taught her about running an estate and managing the lumber business. Vernon Thornhill was convicted of 2 counts of murder and multiple counts of fraud. He was hanged the following year. Ada didn't attend the execution, but Henry did, standing witness to justice for his parents. Garrett and the other hired men received prison sentences. Ruth visited often, becoming an honorary grandmother to the boys. Judge Abernathy became a trusted friend and advisor, and Ada McCrae, who'd spent 7 years hiding from life, discovered that sometimes the family you need finds you in the most unexpected places. Sometimes saving someone else is how you save yourself. Years later, when Henry was 21 and officially took control of the family business, he stood in that same library and opened the safe behind the painting. Inside, along with important papers and his mother's jewels, he found one more letter from his father. To my sons, it read. If you're reading this, you survived. You found the help you needed, and you made it to adulthood. I'm proud of you. Build good lives. Be good men. Remember that we loved you more than anything in this world. And take care of whoever took care of you. They deserve everything you can give them. Your loving father. Henry showed the letter to his brothers and then to Ada, who was 50 now, with grey streaking her hair but still strong and vital. He was right, Henry said. You deserve everything. You saved us. You gave us our lives back. You gave me mine back too, Ada replied. That makes us even, I think. They stood together in the library, surrounded by books and light and the life they'd built together. Outside, the mountains rose in the distance, eternal and beautiful, holding the memories of their journey. True north, the compass had said. They'd found their way home, and sometimes Ada knew that's all anyone can ask for, to find home, to find family, to find purpose in protecting the ones you love. She'd lost Rose. She'd lost 7 years to grief and isolation, but she'd found these 3 boys. And in saving them, she'd finally saved herself. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.